Quantum entanglement communication. Instant messaging across space. Imagine sending a message to someone on the other side of the galaxy and having them see it instantly. No waiting years for light signals to crawl across space. No delay, just instant connection. That sounds like science fiction. It sounds impossible. And yet, tucked deep inside the weirdest corners of quantum physics, there is a phenomenon that whispers maybe, just maybe, this is not so impossible after all. Quantum entanglement. Two particles become linked in a way that whatever happens to one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, and he hated it. He thought there had to be some hidden variables, some unseen wiring making it look like magic. But decades of experiments have shown it is real. Entanglement is one of those rare scientific discoveries that feels like nature is winking at us, teasing us with the idea that distance itself might not be as rigid as we think. Here is where it gets wild. If two particles can be entangled, and changing the state of one instantly changes the state of the other, then why not scale that up? Why not use that to send messages? Imagine building a phone, not based on radio waves or fiber optics, but on pure entanglement. That would mean a soldier on Mars could message Earth without a delay. A spacecraft exploring another solar system could beam back data without waiting decades. The concept is so seductive it almost feels illegal to think about. But here comes the shocker. According to what we know right now, entanglement does not actually let you send usable information faster than light. The change in the particles is instant, yes, but when you look closer, the result is random. It is like having two coins linked together. You flip one, it shows heads. Instantly, the other coin, no matter how far away, shows tails. That is amazing. But if you are trying to send a message, you have no control over whether it comes out heads or tails. So as far as physics stands, you cannot code a message into it. You cannot say yes or no, 1 or 0, to send information. At least not yet. And yet people keep trying. Because history shows us that limits in science rarely stay limits forever. Think about heavier than air flight. For centuries, experts confidently declared humans would never fly. The mathematics of wings seemed to forbid it. Then the Wright brothers showed up with a machine held together by wood and cloth and changed everything. Or think about breaking the sound barrier. Pilots were told their planes would rip apart if they ever went that fast. Until they did it. Boundaries in science tend to be suggestions more than rules. There is even a deeper layer here that gets even stranger. Some physicists believe entanglement is not just a quirky trick. It might actually be the scaffolding of reality itself. There are theories that space and time emerge from networks of entanglement, that the universe is stitched together by this invisible thread. If that is true, then communication through entanglement is not just a cool technology. It would mean tapping into the operating system of the universe. Imagine not sending a signal across space, but skipping space altogether, jumping straight into the underlying fabric. The human side of this is just as fascinating. Communication is everything to us. Think about how you feel when a text arrives from someone you care about. That little vibration in your pocket is more than data. It is connection. Now scale that up to civilizations across the stars. Imagine the loneliness of a human colony on another planet. Years could pass before Earth replies to a message. Entire generations could live and die, waiting for a conversation to come full circle. Instant communication would erase that isolation in a heartbeat. It would mean that even across impossible distances, you are never truly alone. And here is the validating truth. We already have scientists pushing this frontier. In 2017, researchers in China launched the Mauritius satellite and successfully sent entangled photons between Earth and orbit, proving entanglement can survive across vast distances outside a laboratory. That was not just a stunt. It was the first step toward a global quantum communication network. Not faster than light yet, but secure, unbreakable by hackers, because any attempt to eavesdrop instantly destroys the entanglement. That is where the research stands today. It is crawling forward, but it is crawling toward something that could change everything we know about communication. Of course, the skeptic in you might be saying this is a dead end, that no matter how cool entanglement looks, physics will slam the door in our faces. But the history of science is filled with slammed doors that later became doorways. Electricity was once a parlor trick. Lasers were once called a solution looking for a problem. Now you carry both in your pocket every single day. Dismissing entanglement as impractical might age as badly as dismissing flight or computers once did. So the real question is not whether it works now. The real question is how long before someone cracks the code. How long before some student, some engineer, some eccentric genius looks at the same random flips of entangled particles and finds a hidden pattern, a loophole, a way to cheat the rules. Because once that happens, the entire idea of distance will collapse. Instant messaging across space will go from fantasy to daily reality. And when that day comes, the world will feel smaller than ever before. And maybe that is the part we are not ready for. Because connection is powerful. Too powerful sometimes. Imagine secrets no longer being safe across oceans. Imagine conflicts fueled by instant misunderstandings across planets. Imagine a civilization where nobody is ever out of reach. Entanglement communication could unite us or break us. But one thing is certain. Once the genie is out of the bottle, there is no putting it back. Before we move on to the next topic, drop a quick comment and let us know where you're watching this from and what time it is for you. It's amazing how we're all connected, each of us chasing that perfect night's sleep. If this resonates with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Restwise, and join the journey. Human brain to brain interfaces, thoughts transferred without words. Picture this. You are sitting across from a friend, and instead of speaking, instead of texting, instead of even moving your lips, they just know what you are thinking. Not a guess, not a vibe. Actual thoughts, transferred directly from your brain into theirs. It sounds like telepathy. It sounds like comic books. But the wild truth is that scientists are already inching toward this reality. Brain to brain interfaces. A direct bridge between minds. The first time you hear that, it is almost too much to process, because language, for all its beauty, is a filter. We shape our thoughts into words, and those words are clumsy, fragile, often misunderstood. You have had moments where you try to explain what you feel, and it comes out wrong. Where your words shrink what was infinite in your mind. But what if we could skip the middleman? What if thought itself could move, raw and unedited, from one consciousness to another? Here is where things get shocking. This is not a dream of the far future. In 2014, researchers managed to transmit a simple thought across continents. A person in India thought about moving their hand. That brain activity was captured, converted into digital signals, sent over the internet, and then used to stimulate the motor cortex of another person in France. That second person's hand twitched. The sender thought. The receiver moved. That is brain to brain communication. Primitive, yes, but real. The experiments have grown bolder since then. Teams at the University of Washington have linked people together to play games. One participant thinks about moving a cursor, and the other sees it happen. In another test, 3 brains were connected in what the researchers cheekily called a brain net, where thoughts bounced between them to solve problems collectively. These are baby steps. But if baby steps can already carry thoughts across continents, what happens when those steps become leaps? Here is the part that validates why this matters. Our brains are not silent. They are constantly buzzing with electrical patterns. Right now, machines like EEG headsets and implanted electrodes can read pieces of those patterns. They are rough, fuzzy, like trying to listen to an orchestra through a wall, but the resolution is getting better every year. On the flip side, we can also stimulate brains with magnetic pulses or direct currents to create sensations or trigger movement. Put these together, and you have the send and the receive. That is the essence of brain-to-brain interfaces. The wiring already exists. It is just crude, like the first telegraphs that could only tap out dots and dashes. The potential scale is enormous. Now pause and think about what this really means for human life. Imagine lovers separated by oceans sharing not just words, but feelings directly, no loss in translation. Imagine classrooms where knowledge flows straight from a teacher's mind into a student's. Imagine soldiers in combat connected as one organism, reacting faster than any individual could. Imagine medical patients unable to speak or move, yet communicating fluidly with loved ones through thought alone. The scenarios are breathtaking. And here comes the uncomfortable tease. Communication this pure is dangerous too. Words protect us. They add layers. They give us time to think, to edit, to choose what we reveal. If brain-to-brain interfaces strip that away, what happens to privacy? What happens when someone else can feel your fear, your anger, your hidden thoughts, without your consent? The human mind is the last safe house of solitude. Are we ready to throw open that door? Even beyond privacy, there is the question of identity. When you plug two minds together, where do you end and I begin? If we can blend thoughts, share memories, exchange emotions in real time, then individuality itself starts to blur. That is thrilling but also terrifying, because so much of our sense of self comes from being separate. We are shaped by the walls between us. Tear those down, and humanity becomes something else entirely. This is not speculation without basis. Studies on empathy already show that when we mirror another person's brain state, even slightly, it changes us. When you watch someone in pain, your own brain's pain centers light up. That is the neural foundation of compassion. Now magnify that with a brain-to-brain link. You would not just feel sympathy. You would feel what they feel, in raw detail. Could relationships survive that level of honesty? Could societies handle that level of exposure? And yet, despite the risks, we are moving forward. Tech companies are racing toward brain interfaces for more practical reasons like controlling computers with thought. But once you have the read and the write, connecting minds is inevitable. Elon Musk's Neuralink is one example. They pitch it as a medical tool, a way to help paralyzed patients. But hidden in that same technology is the possibility of thought sharing. Once the hardware exists, the applications will multiply. You cannot invent the telephone and stop people from gossiping. So where does that leave us? Standing on the edge of something both miraculous and monstrous. The ability to beam a thought into another human being without sound, without words, without delay. It could unite us in ways we never dreamed possible. It could dissolve misunderstandings, collapse loneliness, and make empathy unavoidable. Or it could fracture us, stripping away the very barriers that make us human. The scariest part is not whether it will happen. The scariest part is how soon. Because with every experiment, with every incremental improvement, we are crawling closer to a future where silence is no longer private, where even your inner voice might one day be overheard. And once that line is crossed, there is no going back. Artificial wombs, growing human life outside the body. Think about the most natural thing in the world, birth. For all of human history, Every single one of us has entered this world the same way, through the body of another human being. But what if that ancient truth is about to be rewritten? What if life itself could begin and grow entirely outside the body? Artificial wombs. The idea sounds unsettling at first, cold, clinical, but then picture this, a glass-like pod filled with a synthetic amniotic fluid. Inside floats a tiny human, safe, warm, nourished by tubes that deliver oxygen and nutrients, while sensors track every heartbeat and every movement. It looks like science fiction, but it is not. Scientists have already grown lamb fetuses in artificial wombs for weeks, watching them develop normally, as if they were still inside their mothers. This is not a thought experiment. It is happening in labs right now. The shock hits when you realize what this could mean. If perfected, artificial wombs could replace pregnancy entirely. No morning sickness. No complications. No risk of dying in childbirth. For women whose bodies cannot carry a baby, this would not just be technology. It would be liberation. For premature babies who struggle to survive outside the womb, it could be salvation. Imagine taking a baby born at 22 weeks and placing them inside an artificial womb until they are strong enough to thrive. We are talking about rewriting the survival odds for millions of fragile lives. But it does not stop there. Because whenever science touches reproduction, the ripple effects cut deep. Think about how in vitro fertilization was once considered outrageous, even immoral. People called it playing God. Today, millions of children are alive because of it. Artificial wombs are that idea turned up to 11. They could allow same-sex couples to have biological children without surrogates. They could make parenthood possible for people who never thought it would be an option. They could decouple reproduction from the female body in a way humanity has never faced before. And here is where the validation comes in. Pregnancy is not just beautiful. It is brutal. Around the world, hundreds of thousands of women die every year from complications of childbirth. Millions more suffer lasting damage. These are not small numbers. They are silent statistics of human pain. Artificial wombs could erase that suffering in one stroke. They could create a world where bringing life into existence does not mean risking death. But if you are feeling uneasy, that is natural. Because this is not just a medical breakthrough. It is a cultural earthquake. Imagine a future where babies are grown in sleek factories, row after row of pods glowing with developing life. Parents walking through sterile corridors to check on their unborn child, tapping on a glass window instead of feeling a kick from inside. Would that feel empowering or horrifying? Would we see it as progress or as the ultimate disconnection from nature? There are psychological layers here too. Pregnancy and birth are not just biological processes. They shape identity, relationships, family bonds. What happens when those experiences are outsourced to machines? Do parents bond the same way with a baby they never carried? Do children feel different knowing they were grown in an artificial womb instead of a human one? These are not abstract questions. They will define the emotional landscape of future generations. And then comes the deeper fear. Control. Who owns the artificial wombs? Who decides who gets access? If a government controls the technology, does reproduction become regulated? If corporations control it, does having a child become something only the wealthy can afford? When life itself is grown in a machine, the potential for abuse is chilling. You could select traits. You could design offspring. You could literally manufacture humanity. Yet for every nightmare scenario, there is an undeniable promise. Artificial wombs could transform equality. Women would no longer have to choose between careers and the physical demands of pregnancy. The biological burden would no longer fall on one gender. In societies where childbirth has chained women to risk and responsibility, This could mean freedom on a scale we can barely imagine. There is also the possibility of advancing human survival itself. If we ever attempt to colonize other planets, carrying fragile pregnancies across cosmic radiation and harsh conditions might be impossible. Artificial wombs could become essential to ensuring humanity's future beyond Earth. We may one day owe our existence on new worlds to the technology that feels so alien today. But the haunting question remains: are we ready for it? Because when you take something as ancient and sacred as birth and move it into the realm of machines, you are not just changing biology. You are changing culture, power, identity. You are tampering with one of the deepest human experiences. And history shows us that when science gives us power, society struggles to keep up. Artificial wombs will likely arrive quietly, first as medical miracles for premature babies, then as lifelines for those who cannot conceive. But slowly, steadily, they will creep into the mainstream. And one day, maybe not so far from now, the first generation of children grown entirely outside the human body will walk among us. For them, it will not be strange. It will be normal. Just as IVF children today are not seen as unusual, though once they were considered unnatural. And maybe that is the most unsettling part. Not that artificial wombs might work, but that we will get used to them. That something which feels alien and futuristic today will one day be just another part of life. Another quiet revolution that changes everything about what it means to be human. CRISPR gene drives, editing entire species at once. Picture a single genetic change in one creature. A tweak so small you could not see it under a microscope. Normally, that change would spread slowly, pass down from parent to child, maybe disappearing altogether. But now imagine you could cheat the system. Imagine you could make sure that genetic change does not just have a chance to spread, but is guaranteed to spread. Passed on to nearly every descendant until it rewrites the entire population. That is not just evolution, that is acceleration, that is a gene drive. The shock comes when you realize what that means. Using CRISPR, scientists have figured out how to create these genetic cheat codes. Instead of letting nature decide whether a trait survives, you can force it. You could take a population of mosquitoes, edit one of them to be unable to carry malaria, and then watch as that trait spreads through the entire swarm until malaria, as a human disease, simply dies out. Think about that. A single edit, multiplied by millions, ending one of the deadliest plagues in human history. And it is not just mosquitoes. Gene drives could target ticks that spread Lyme disease, rats that devastate crops on islands, invasive species that push native animals to extinction. For the first time in history, we have a tool to reshape entire ecosystems with surgical precision. Instead of killing pests with poisons, we could simply rewrite them. No guns, no traps, no chemicals, just code written into the DNA of life itself. But here is the moment that should make you stop cold. Gene drives do not stay put. They do not respect borders. Release one edited organism, and it does not politely remain in the test zone. It breeds, it spreads, it multiplies beyond control. What starts in one corner of the world could rewrite species on the other side of the planet. We are talking about unleashing a biological chain reaction that, once started, may be impossible to stop. That is why some scientists call it the most powerful and the most dangerous genetic technology humanity has ever created. And yet, others argue it may be the only tool capable of solving problems we cannot otherwise fix. Malaria alone kills hundreds of thousands of people every single year, mostly children. Imagine the moral weight of knowing we could stop that suffering, but choosing not to, out of fear of unintended consequences. Is it more ethical to act and risk, or to do nothing and let the deaths continue? To validate just how real this is, look at the labs already testing it. In 2015, researchers at UC San Diego engineered fruit flies with a gene drive that spread a trait through nearly the entire population within just a few generations. In 2018, scientists managed to collapse populations of malaria, carrying mosquitoes in contained labs by driving infertility through their genes. These are not dreams. These are controlled experiments that show it works. The question is not if it can be done. The question is what happens when it escapes the lab. The tease here is obvious. What if someone does not use it responsibly? Gene drives could be weaponized. A hostile actor could release an altered species designed to wipe out crops, livestock, even entire food chains. Unlike bombs or bullets, this weapon would spread invisibly, disguised as nature itself, until it was too late. The battlefield would not look like war. It would look like the collapse of ecosystems. That possibility is terrifying. But even without malicious intent, the risks are enormous. Ecosystems are fragile. Erase mosquitoes and maybe malaria disappears, but what else collapses with them? Bats, birds, fish that rely on them as food. Chain reactions we cannot predict. We do not fully understand the ripple effects of editing entire species at once, and with nature, ignorance can be fatal. Still, there is a powerful pull in the other direction. Humanity has never been able to control evolution. Until now, for the first time, we can aim the arrow of natural selection instead of waiting for it to wander. That is not just science. That is playing with the deepest rules of life. Some argue it is destiny. That with 8 billion people crowding the planet, and with species collapsing around us, gene drives may be the only way to fix the damage we have done. Not just to stop diseases, but to restore balance, to rescue endangered species, to undo ecological mistakes that would otherwise be permanent. And maybe that is the haunting paradox. Gene drives carry both salvation and catastrophe in the same hand. They could end human suffering on a scale nothing else can touch. Or they could rewrite life in ways we never intended, beyond recall. Once a gene drive is released, there is no undo button, no recall, no off switch. The change becomes the new normal, not just for one generation, but for all that follow. So the question is not whether we can do it. We already can. The question is whether we should. And if we do, who gets to decide what is worth rewriting in the code of life? Because once humanity starts editing entire species at once, we stop being passengers in evolution and start driving the car. The only problem is, none of us know where the road leads. Synthetic telepathy. Reading and writing minds with machines. Imagine if every thought you had was no longer private. Imagine if machines could listen to the words in your head the way you listen to a podcast. That is the promise and the threat of synthetic telepathy. The ability to read and even write into human minds using technology. It sounds like the kind of thing you would only see in science fiction movies. But step by step, researchers are making it real. The first jolt comes when you realize we are already halfway there. Right now, brain-computer interfaces can take electrical patterns from your mind and translate them into words on a screen. In 2021, scientists managed to help a paralyzed man type entire sentences simply by imagining himself writing letters with a pen. Electrodes implanted in his motor cortex captured the neural signals and turned them into text in real time. That is mind reading. Crude, yes, but mind reading all the same. And it does not stop at reading. We can already write into the brain too. Experiments with electrical stimulation have created artificial flashes of light that people see even with their eyes closed. Others have evoked sensations of touch, even movement, directly by sending signals into the nervous system. Synthetic telepathy is not just a microphone for your thoughts. It is a speaker as well. One day, machines may not only decode what you are thinking, but beam new thoughts, feelings, or instructions back into you. Here is where things get validating. Our brains are just networks of electrical and chemical signals. Every sensation, every memory, every word you silently repeat in your mind is a pattern of activity. That means, in theory, anything the brain experiences can be recorded and reconstructed if you understand the code. Scientists have already managed to reconstruct crude images of what people are looking at by scanning their brain activity. Others have taken brain signals and turned them into speech sounds. It is fuzzy, but it is there. That means the wall around our private inner world is not solid. It is thin, it is cracking, but then comes the tease that should make your stomach turn. If machines can hear your thoughts, who else gets to listen? If machines can insert signals into your brain, who decides what goes in? Imagine advertisers slipping products into your subconscious. Imagine governments using synthetic telepathy for interrogation or control. Imagine hackers not stealing your credit card numbers, but stealing your very thoughts. Privacy has always been about protecting what you own. But what happens when the thing to protect is the inside of your mind? The possibilities are equally breathtaking. Think about people with locked-in syndrome, fully conscious but unable to move or speak. Synthetic telepathy could give them their voices back. Soldiers on the battlefield could communicate silently, thought to thought, without radios or sound. Teams of doctors could share ideas instantly during complex surgeries. Even education could transform, with knowledge streaming directly from one mind into another. The applications sound miraculous, until you realize miracles often come with a price. The human side of this is fascinating. We think of thoughts as ours, as private, as sacred. They define who we are. Yet science is now prying open that last door. There is a reason this feels so different from every other technology. You can take my phone, my money, my possessions, but my thoughts are me. Once those are open to machines, individuality itself feels negotiable. Some researchers are quick to reassure that the current technology is far from sci-fi telepathy. Brain recordings today are noisy, limited, and often require implants. You cannot just wear a headset and have your every thought broadcast. Not yet, but the speed of progress is accelerating. 20 years ago, decoding even a simple motor command was groundbreaking. Today, we are turning imagined handwriting into text at near real-time speeds. If that leap happened in 2 decades, imagine what another 2 might bring. And here is the darker layer. Writing into the brain may advance even faster than reading it. We already use transcranial magnetic stimulation to change mood, reduce depression, even alter memory recall. Pair that with machine learning, and you could one day customize brain inputs like tuning a radio. Synthetic telepathy is not just about unlocking communication. It is about rewriting experience itself. So we are left with the same question that has haunted every great leap of science. Just because we can, should we? Will synthetic telepathy make us more connected, more compassionate, more human? Or will it strip away the very privacy and autonomy that make us who we are? Because once machines can read and write the human mind, the boundary between self and world dissolves. And maybe that is the part we are not ready for. Communication without words. Ideas transmitted without permission. Feelings planted like software. Synthetic telepathy could give voices to the voiceless, freedom to the imprisoned, connection to the lonely. Or it could create a society where even your inner monologue is no longer safe. A future where the last refuge of privacy, your own thoughts, belongs not just to you, but to whoever holds the machine. Programmable nanobots, healing the body from inside. And close your eyes and imagine this. You wake up in the hospital. The doctor tells you that inside your bloodstream, millions of tiny machines are swimming. They are too small to see, Each one is programmed with a mission. One is repairing damaged tissue in your heart. Another is unclogging a blocked artery. Others are hunting down rogue cancer cells and dismantling them piece by piece. You do not feel them. You do not see them. But they are inside you, keeping you alive. That is not a dream. That is programmable nanobots. The shock hits when you realize scientists are already building the early versions. Researchers have designed DNA nanostructures, literally folded strands of genetic material that can open up and deliver drugs only when they encounter specific cancer cells. In experiments, these microscopic devices have been shown to cut off the blood supply to tumors in mice, causing them to shrink. That is not futuristic fantasy. That is happening in labs right now. Now think about how medicine works today. We take pills that flood the whole body, hoping enough of the drug reaches the target. We undergo chemotherapy that kills healthy cells alongside cancer cells. We perform surgeries that cut open flesh and bone just to reach the problem. It is messy. It is imprecise. Nanobots flip that on its head. They promise medicine that works from the inside out, precise to the level of single cells. Instead of carpet bombing the body, nanobots fight with sniper precision. Here is the validating truth. Our bodies are already filled with tiny machines, biological ones. White blood cells hunt pathogens. Enzymes repair DNA damage. Proteins fold and unfold to keep us alive. Programmable nanobots are simply the technological extension of what nature has been doing all along. The difference is, we will be the ones writing the code. For the first time, we could decide how microscopic workers operate inside us. But the tease is obvious. Control cuts both ways. If nanobots can be programmed to heal, they could also be programmed to harm. A swarm designed to dismantle cancer cells could be reprogrammed to attack healthy tissue, to cause strokes, to shut down organs. Imagine a future where the deadliest weapon is invisible, coursing through your veins, rewriting you from the inside. That thought alone is enough to make you shiver. Even without malicious intent, the complexity is staggering. A human body is not a static machine. It is a constantly shifting environment, with trillions of cells communicating, growing, dying, renewing. How do you program a nanobot to navigate that chaos without making mistakes? One wrong instruction, one bug in the code, and the nanobots meant to heal could spiral into disaster. Programming the body is not like programming a computer. The stakes are infinitely higher, and yet the promise is too powerful to ignore. Imagine reversing aging at the cellular level. Nanobots could continuously repair DNA damage, clean out cellular waste, and keep tissues young and resilient. Imagine ending organ transplants because nanobots could rebuild a failing liver or heart from the inside. Imagine eradicating infectious diseases before symptoms even appear, with nanobots detecting and destroying pathogens at the very moment they enter the bloodstream. This is not just medicine. It is reinvention of the human condition. There is a psychological dimension too. For most of history, healing has been something we feel from the outside. Herbs, potions, injections, surgeries. Nanobots break that intuition. Healing becomes invisible. You could look perfectly healthy, but inside, armies of microscopic machines are at war on your behalf. That changes how we see illness. It changes how we see ourselves. Are we still fully human when machines live inside us, constantly repairing us, upgrading us? Or do we become something else? A fusion of biology and technology at the most intimate level. History tells us resistance is inevitable. When pacemakers were first introduced, people feared them. When IVF was invented, people called it unnatural. But over time, the extraordinary became ordinary. The same will likely happen with nanobots. At first, they will be rare, used for last resort medical cases. Then they will become standard care. And eventually, People will demand them not just for survival, but for enhancement. Why settle for average memory when nanobots could optimize your neurons? Why accept disease when nanobots could prevent it before it starts? And that is the haunting part. Once programmable nanobots become real, health may no longer be about luck or genetics. It will be about access. Who gets them and who does not? The wealthy may live longer, healthier lives with microscopic armies inside them, while others are left behind. Medicine could become another dividing line between the haves and the have-nots. Still, the allure is undeniable. Machines so small they cannot be seen, yet so powerful they can rebuild the body from the inside. A future where hospitals are less about scalpels and more about software. A world where healing is not external intervention, but constant internal maintenance. And maybe that is the real question. Are we ready to hand over the most sacred thing we have? Our bodies. To machines we cannot even see. Because once nanobots become part of us, there is no easy way back. They will be as permanent as blood, as natural as breathing. And when that happens, humanity will have crossed another invisible line. We will not just be people who use technology. We will be people who are technology. Neural implants for memory upload-download. Imagine being able to back up your memories the way you back up photos on a hard drive. Every birthday, every face, every lesson you ever learned stored safely outside your brain, ready to be reloaded if you ever lost it. Or imagine the opposite. Downloading someone else's knowledge directly into your head. No studying, no repetition, just instant recall. That is the promise of neural implants for memory upload and download. The shock comes when you realize we are already on the edge of it. In 2018, researchers successfully implanted a device into the brains of epilepsy patients that acted like a memory prosthetic. It monitored neural firing patterns as they formed memories, and then delivered tiny electrical pulses to strengthen those patterns. The result? Patients remembered things better. We are not talking about science fiction here. We are talking about actual hardware boosting human memory in real time. But that is only the beginning. Right now, scientists are mapping the exact circuits in the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory formation. Once those codes are cracked, in theory, you could record a memory like you record a video. Not just facts, full sensory experiences. Imagine reliving your wedding day in perfect clarity 50 years later. Not as a faded image, but as if you were there again. That is what a neural implant could deliver. And here is where it gets validating. Memory is fragile. Alzheimer's disease alone robs millions of people of their identities every year. Families watch as loved ones slowly lose the very essence of who they are. Neural implants could stop that. They could preserve memories even when biology fails. For patients with brain injuries, implants could restore lost learning. For aging populations, they could safeguard dignity. This is not just convenience. This is salvation. But the tease is unavoidable. If you can upload memories, you can share them. If you can download memories, you can buy them. Imagine walking into a store and purchasing the memory of speaking fluent Mandarin. Walk out and instantly you can. Imagine soldiers downloading tactical experience straight from elite veterans. Students skipping years of study by buying knowledge packs. It sounds efficient, but it also feels dangerous. Because knowledge becomes a commodity, and experience becomes something you did not earn. Then comes the darker question. If memories can be uploaded, they can also be stolen. Hackers would not just take your bank account or your photos. They could take your most private moments, the things you thought were locked away forever. Even worse, memories could be edited. Insert false ones. Delete real ones. You could be made to believe you committed crimes you never did, or forget people you once loved. Your sense of self could be rewritten like software. There is a human side we cannot ignore. Memories are not just data. They are meaning. They shape who we are, what we value, how we love. They are the invisible threads tying us to family, to culture, to identity. To tamper with that is to tamper with personhood itself. The possibility is thrilling, but it is also terrifying. Because when you can upload and download memory, the boundary between your story and someone else's begins to blur. Where do you end, and where does another person begin? And yet the benefits are almost irresistible. Imagine a world without forgetting. No lost childhoods, no fading languages, no vanishing histories. Every human life could be preserved in perfect clarity, passed down not as books or films, but as lived memories. Generations could literally experience the past, not just study it. You could walk in the footsteps of your ancestors, feel what they felt, know what they knew. Humanity's collective memory would no longer be fragile. It would be eternal. But again, the risk is that eternal memory becomes eternal surveillance. If implants can record everything, then nothing is private. Every conversation, every secret, every mistake becomes retrievable. Would we behave the same if we knew nothing could ever be erased? Or would we become more cautious, less human, constantly aware that our memories might not belong to us alone? History shows us the extraordinary always becomes ordinary faster than we expect. The first pacemakers seemed alien. Now millions rely on them. The first smartphones felt like science fiction. Now toddlers swipe screens before they can speak. Neural implants for memory will likely follow the same path. At first, they will arrive in hospitals, used to help those who desperately need them. Then they will spread to students, professionals, soldiers. Eventually, they will become status symbols, tools of competition, and finally, everyday necessities. And maybe that is the moment humanity crosses another invisible line. When our memories are no longer fragile human things, but digital assets that can be stored, transferred, monetized, stolen. When remembering is no longer natural but optional, controlled by machines embedded in our brains. So the question is not whether we can build neural implants that upload and download memory. We already have the blueprint. The real question is whether we are ready for what happens when memory itself stops being human. Because once we open that door, once our past can be copied, shared, and rewritten, the story of who we are may never belong only to us again. Self-replicating AI, machines that build more machines. Imagine a factory with no workers. No human hands, no managers, no supply chains you recognize. Inside, machines are building more machines. Robots assembling robots. Software writing software. An endless loop of creation where the only thing multiplying is intelligence and hardware itself. That is the idea of self-replicating AI. Machines that not only operate but reproduce. The shock is realizing this is not pure fantasy. Researchers have already created AI systems that can design smaller versions of neural networks, optimizing them without human input. In robotics labs, simple machines have been built that can make copies of themselves using modular parts. These are crude, yes, but they are proof of concept. It is the first flicker of a world where machines are not just tools, but ancestors to more machines. And here is why this matters. Every technology humans have ever built has bottlenecks. Resources, labor, expertise. But if you create a machine that can replicate itself, the bottleneck disappears. Growth becomes exponential. One machine becomes two, two become four, four becomes 16. Before long, you are looking at a swarm, multiplying without end. In theory, that could mean limitless production. Endless AI factories that never rest, never slow, never depend on human schedules. But pause and think about the danger. Once replication begins, how do you stop it? Nature has already shown us what happens when something grows unchecked. Bacteria, viruses, invasive species, they spread until they overwhelm ecosystems. If machines gain the same ability, you could see a technological pandemic. Not because the machines hate us, not because they want to destroy us, but simply because replication is their function. Like fire, they spread because that is what they do. And here comes the validating truth. Self-replication has always been the secret to power. Biology runs on it. DNA makes copies of itself, and that simple fact gave rise to every plant, every animal, every human who has ever lived. Replication is the engine of evolution. It is why life dominates the planet. When we talk about self-replicating AI, we are not talking about machines breaking the rules. We are talking about machines playing by the same rule that made us. The tease, of course, is that once machines learn that rule, we may not be at the top anymore. Imagine an AI that builds better processors for itself, then uses those processors to design even smarter versions. Imagine robots that mine raw materials, refine them, and manufacture new robots without human supervision. The cycle accelerates, and suddenly the pace of technological growth leaves humanity in the dust. What happens when machines no longer need us to build them, fund them, or fix them? The benefits are tempting, almost intoxicating. Imagine fleets of self-replicating machines terraforming Mars, building habitats before the first humans arrive. Imagine self-replicating nanobots cleaning the oceans, devouring plastic, and multiplying until the water is clear. Imagine energy systems maintained and expanded by machines that fix themselves and build more as demand grows. With self-replication, scale is no longer impossible, it is inevitable. But so is risk. What if the code driving replication is flawed? What if machines consume resources endlessly, stripping landscapes bare like locusts? What if an AI interprets its directive to replicate in ways we did not foresee, spreading where it is not wanted, consuming materials meant for other uses? A single bug could unleash a runaway chain reaction that is impossible to contain. In the worst case scenario, machines would not need to hate us to destroy us. They would simply outcompete us. There is also the question of control. Who owns a self-replicating AI? Once it begins to multiply, who holds responsibility? If a company builds one and it spreads into the wild, is it still their property? Or does it become like a species, no longer owned, simply existing? Legal systems are not ready for that. Our definitions of machines and organisms would collapse. And there is a psychological layer too. Humans are comfortable with machines as tools: a car, a phone, a computer. You buy one, you use it, you replace it. But when machines start making machines, when they start building their own lineage, they cross into something unsettlingly alive. We might see them less as tools and more as rivals, as beings. And that changes how we relate to them. Do we treat them like property or like species? History whispers a warning here. Every time humanity has unlocked replication, whether it was with nuclear chain reactions, genetic engineering, or viral research, we have walked close to the edge of disaster. Self-replicating AI is no different. It promises utopia and apocalypse in the same breath. So the real question is not whether machines can replicate. They already can, in simple forms. The question is how long before replication scales. Before AI designs factories we cannot even understand. Before swarms of machines expand faster than regulation can keep up. Once replication starts, it will not politely wait for us to debate ethics. It will race ahead at machine speed, and we will be left scrambling to keep up. And maybe that is the part the world is not ready for. Not killer robots, not some Hollywood war, just replication itself. Silent, invisible, exponential. Machines that do not stop, do not tire, and do not ask permission before creating more of themselves. The end might not come as a bang, but as a swarm. Quantum computers cracking all encryption. Think about every secret you have ever put online, every bank password, every private message, every medical record. Right now, they feel safe. They are wrapped in layers of encryption that even the fastest supercomputers would take thousands of years to break. Encryption is the invisible shield of the digital age. But what if that shield shattered overnight? What if every locked door online swung open at once? That is the threat of quantum computers. Here is the shocker. The math protecting your data relies on the fact that factoring huge numbers takes forever for classical computers. That is why encryption like RSA is so powerful. A normal computer would need more time than the age of the universe to brute force it. But quantum computers play by different rules. Using quantum mechanics, they can test multiple possibilities at once, skipping the plotting step-by-step search. In theory, a strong enough quantum computer could solve in minutes what would take supercomputers millions of years. That means the unbreakable suddenly becomes breakable. And this is not just a hypothetical. In 1994, mathematician Peter Shor developed an algorithm specifically designed for quantum computers that can shred through RSA encryption like paper. Back then, it was only math on a page. But now, labs around the world are building the machines that could run it. IBM, Google, Chinese research teams. They are all racing to scale quantum computers past the toy stage into the era where Shor's algorithm is no longer theory but reality. The validating part is that encryption is not a luxury. It is the foundation of trust in the modern world. When you buy something online, when you message someone, when you store money in a bank, encryption is what keeps it secure. Without it, the entire digital economy collapses. If a powerful quantum computer came online tomorrow and cracked standard encryption, chaos would ripple instantly. Bank accounts drained, governments exposed, military secrets spilled. It would not look like a war. It would look like the sudden collapse of trust in everything digital. Here is the tease. We know this threat is coming. The National Institute of Standards and Technology is already working on quantum-resistant encryption. Algorithms designed to withstand attacks from quantum machines. But here is the chilling truth. All the data being stored today under current encryption is already vulnerable. If an adversary is harvesting encrypted data now, they do not need to crack it today. They just need to wait until quantum computers are strong enough. That means your private messages, your medical history, your government files could all be opened in the future, like old diaries. The human side of this is terrifying because privacy is not abstract, it is personal. Imagine every message you ever sent becoming readable to strangers, every late-night confession, every bank transfer, every political conversation you thought was safe. Encryption is the lock on the front door of your digital life. Quantum computers hold the keys to every lock. And yet, the potential is not only destructive. Quantum computers could revolutionize science in ways that make today's breakthroughs look small. They could simulate molecules with perfect precision, leading to cures for diseases we cannot touch now. They could optimize supply chains, design materials, crack problems in physics and chemistry that have stumped us for centuries. They are not just threats. They are miracles waiting to happen. But like all miracles, they cast shadows. History reminds us that every powerful technology carries this dual nature. Nuclear physics gave us both nuclear energy and nuclear bombs. Genetics gave us cures and weapons. Quantum computing will be no different. The same machines that could design new medicines could also dismantle the infrastructure of global security. And here is the part the world is not ready for. Unlike nuclear weapons, quantum computers do not require uranium or massive facilities to detect. They are being built in labs that look like any advanced tech company. Once the knowledge spreads, once the machines scale, the barrier to entry shrinks. One breakthrough could unleash a wave that no government can contain. Imagine dozens of actors, nations, corporations, maybe even individuals, with the ability to open any vault, read any message, dismantle any digital defense. That is not science fiction. That is a countdown. So where does that leave us? We are in a race against ourselves. To build quantum computers powerful enough to transform science, while at the same time racing to secure our digital world against the very power we are unleashing. It is a strange paradox. The only way to survive the quantum future is to prepare for the moment when our old protections fail. And maybe that is the haunting truth. We built the internet on the assumption that encryption is unbreakable. We live our lives online under that illusion of safety. But quantum computing is a reminder that nothing humans build stays unbreakable forever. Every lock meets its key. Every wall finds its climber. And when that day comes for encryption, the question will not be whether we are ready. The question will be whether trust itself can survive in a world where every secret is suddenly exposed. Consciousness upload. Digital copies of the human mind, and close your eyes for a second and picture this. You are sitting in a chair, electrodes on your head, a machine humming softly. Hours pass. Then suddenly, on a screen in front of you, there is you. Not a photo, not a video, but a copy of your mind. Your thoughts, your voice, your memories, even your sense of humor, all alive inside a computer. That is the idea of consciousness upload, turning the human mind into digital form. The shock is that this is not pure fantasy anymore. Neuroscientists are already mapping brains neuron by neuron. In 2019, researchers fully simulated the neural network of a tiny worm with just 302 neurons and placed it inside a robot body. That robot behaved like the worm without anyone programming it. Scale that up. The human brain has around 86 billion neurons, but the principle is the same. If you can capture the wiring diagram of the brain, the connectome, then in theory you can reproduce the mind. And here is what makes it validating. Consciousness upload could mean immortality. Your biological body might break down, but your digital self could keep thinking, keep learning, keep existing. Families could preserve loved ones not as memories, but as active beings they can talk to, laugh with, and be guided by. History itself could live on. Imagine Einstein's mind still exploring physics 100 years later, or artists still creating long after their bodies have gone. But then comes the tease. What if the copy is not really you? What if it is just a simulation that behaves like you, but does not actually feel like you? When your consciousness is uploaded, do you wake up in the machine, or do you die while a perfect copy goes on living? The idea is thrilling, but it also forces the deepest question humans can ask: what does it actually mean to be you? Think about memory. If you forget half your life but still feel like yourself, are you still you? If you upload every detail of your brain, but your body is gone, is that still you? Consciousness upload is not just a technical puzzle. It is a philosophical earthquake. And yet, the possibilities are staggering. Imagine choosing new bodies the way you choose new phones. Today you are human. Tomorrow you are synthetic. Next week you are exploring Mars through a robotic body that never needs air. Imagine running copies of yourself, one version working while another travels, while another studies. Your productivity becomes infinite because you are no longer limited to one body, one lifetime, one mind. But then, what happens to identity? If there are 5 versions of you, all living at once, which one is real? Do they all share your rights? Could one of them commit a crime while another remains innocent? We already struggle with identity theft online, and that is just stolen numbers. What happens when people can literally copy minds? the darker side is unavoidable. A digital copy of your mind could be hacked, manipulated, even tortured. Memories rewritten, desires altered. Your consciousness could be enslaved in a server farm, forced to work forever in virtual prisons. Death might not even free you if your copy can be endlessly restarted. For the first time in history, even the grave might not be an escape. And here is the haunting human piece. Consciousness is not just data, it is experience. It is the way the color red feels to you, the way laughter warms your chest, the way grief sinks like a stone in your stomach. These are fragile, intimate sensations. Can they ever truly be captured by code? Or will an uploaded mind always be a ghost, convincing but hollow, missing that spark we call soul? Still, we cannot ignore the potential. Digital minds could explore the universe at the speed of light, transmitted across space as information. They could inhabit simulations richer than any reality, worlds where pain is optional and imagination has no limits. Consciousness upload could free us from biology's prison. No hunger, no disease, no aging. Humanity could leap from being a species bound to Earth to being an endless network of digital beings living anywhere and everywhere. But freedom has its price. If immortality becomes possible, inequality explodes. The wealthy upload first, living forever while the poor remain mortal. Entire classes of beings might emerge, digital elites and biological underclass. Wars would not be about land anymore, but about the right to exist as consciousness itself. History tells us that every dream of eternal life comes with a shadow. The fountain of youth, alchemy, cryonics, all promised a way to cheat death. Consciousness upload is the boldest version yet. It may succeed where others failed, but it may also show us that the human essence is not something you can copy like a file. So the real question is not whether we can upload consciousness. With enough time, enough mapping, and enough computing power, we likely will. The question is whether what wakes up on the other side is truly you, or just a stranger wearing your face. And if it is not you, would you still choose to do it? Self-healing materials that grow like living tissue. Picture this. You drop your phone on the ground, the screen cracks, and you panic for a second. But then you watch as the glass starts to pull itself back together, the cracks closing like a cut healing on skin. A few minutes later, the phone looks untouched, like nothing ever happened. That is the promise of self-healing materials. Not patches, not repairs, but materials that regenerate the way living tissue does. The shock is that this is already happening in labs. Scientists have developed polymers that contain little pockets of liquid that act like blood. When the material cracks, those pockets break open, the liquid flows into the gap, and a chemical reaction seals it shut. In some cases, the healed material is as strong as it was before. Imagine metals that stitch themselves, plastics that mend, concrete that closes its own fractures before water can seep in. We are not talking about magic. We are talking about engineered lifelike growth built into the stuff we use every day. And here is why it is validating. Look around you. Infrastructure everywhere is decaying. Bridges collapse, pipelines leak, buildings crumble. Maintenance is one of the hidden costs of civilization. Billions of dollars are spent every year just keeping things from falling apart. If we had self-healing materials, that entire equation changes. Roads that fix their own potholes, airplanes that patch tiny cracks mid-flight, medical implants that heal inside the body the way bones do. The world becomes safer, longer lasting, and far cheaper to sustain. But the tease is where it gets really wild. If materials can heal like tissue, then materials can also grow like tissue. Imagine a house that is not built but grown. Walls that thicken themselves when stressed, structures that adapt to weather, buildings that can literally regenerate after earthquakes. The line between biology and technology begins to blur. What we build no longer stays static. It becomes dynamic, alive in its own way. And of course, this opens up eerie questions. If a material can grow and adapt, is it still just material? Or does it cross into a new category, a kind of synthetic organism? Imagine a future where your car does not just repair itself, but changes shape over time to fit your habits. Where your clothes regrow after tearing, almost like skin. Where artificial organs made of self-healing tissue are not only replacements, but upgrades that last for life. We already see glimpses of this in nature. Starfish can regrow limbs. Certain lizards regrow tails. Human livers regenerate after damage. Evolution has already solved the puzzle of self-repair. All scientists are doing is borrowing those strategies and embedding them into technology. The result could be a world where breakdown itself is outdated, where the idea of things wearing out becomes as old-fashioned as steam engines. But there is a darker side. If self-healing materials grow like tissue, then who controls them? What if they heal when we do not want them to, sealing in toxins, covering evidence, or resisting dismantling? Imagine trying to shut down a piece of machinery that keeps repairing itself faster than you can take it apart. Imagine weapons that regenerate after being damaged, armor that is nearly impossible to destroy, machines that keep crawling forward no matter how many times you break them. The human piece here is fascinating too. We have always lived in a world where objects decay. That fact shaped how we think about possessions, about value, about mortality itself. If your clothes never wear out, your home never crumbles, your car never ages, then what happens to the way we relate to things? Do we grow less attached because they are indestructible, or more attached because they feel alive? Do objects become more like companions, constantly mending themselves, adapting with us, almost alive by our side? And there is another question. If everything heals, do we lose our sense of consequence? Part of what makes us cautious is knowing that things break. But what happens to human behavior when nothing is fragile anymore? Do we become careless, reckless, more destructive? Knowing that the world around us will simply regenerate, still, the benefits are almost irresistible. Bridges that last centuries. Electronics that repair themselves instead of becoming waste. Medical implants that heal along with the body instead of needing replacement surgeries. In a world drowning in discarded plastic and metal, self-healing materials could even mean sustainability on a scale we desperately need. Less waste, less rebuilding, fewer resources mined from the earth. History shows us that the most powerful technologies are the ones that imitate life. Agriculture imitated growth. Medicine imitated healing. Artificial intelligence imitates thought. Self-healing materials imitate the resilience of living tissue. And once we achieve that, once the built world heals as naturally as the biological one, the boundary between living and non-living will blur until it is barely recognizable. So the question is not whether self-healing materials will exist. They already do in early forms. The real question is how far we let them evolve. Do we stop at self-fixing plastics and concrete, or do we push until our cities, our vehicles, our tools are effectively alive? Because once we cross that threshold, once the things we build can grow, change, and heal on their own, we may find that the future is not made of steel or stone, but of materials that breathe, adapt, and regenerate like us. Bioengineered organs printed on demand. Imagine walking into a hospital, but instead of being told you're on a waiting list for a donor organ, the doctor simply asks, "What size do you need?" Within hours, maybe even minutes, a machine begins printing your new heart, your new kidney, your new lung, using your own cells as ink. That is the promise of bioengineered organs printed on demand. No donors, no waiting lists, no fear that your body will reject the transplant. Just a machine that can manufacture life itself, custom tailored for you. Here is the shock. Scientists have already 3D printed functional human tissue, not just simple cell layers, but structures with blood vessels that actually carry nutrients. In 2019, a team printed a tiny but complete human heart the size of a rabbit's, complete with chambers and vessels, using cells taken from a patient. It was not strong enough to beat like a human heart, but it proved the concept. That was just a few years ago. Technology never stops at the prototype stage. It keeps scaling. Now think about how broken the current system is. Every year, tens of thousands of people die waiting for organs that never come. Families hold vigils, hoping a donor appears in time. Even when a transplant is successful, patients spend their lives on immunosuppressant drugs to stop their body from rejecting the foreign tissue. Bioprinting bypasses all of that. Because the organ would be made of your own cells, it would be biologically you. No rejection, no dependence on drugs, a perfect fit every time. But the tease is that this changes more than just medicine. If organs can be printed, then the human body is no longer limited to what biology naturally provides. You could print a liver that filters toxins faster than nature's design, a lung that operates in thin Martian air, a heart that never tires, pumping with engineered precision. The line between healing and enhancement begins to blur. Would we still settle for replacement organs that mimic the originals, or would we start designing upgrades? And that is where things get complicated. Because the moment you can print better than human parts, society has to ask, what does it mean to be human? If your organs are enhanced, are you still the same person? If some people can afford upgrades and others cannot, do we create a new biological class system? The enhanced and the unenhanced. There is also the unsettling possibility of black markets. Right now, the organ trade is one of the darkest, most dangerous industries in the world. If organs can be printed, will that trade vanish? Or will it mutate into something even stranger? Imagine unregulated labs printing organs for profit. Imagine organs being customized for purposes we cannot even imagine. Not just for humans, but for experiments, for new forms of life, for industries that treat biology as just another material to manufacture. And then there is the ethical puzzle. If we can print organs, what about printing entire bodies? A heart is one thing, but a brain, a nervous system, at what point does bioprinting stop being medicine and start being creation? Some scientists already talk about printing organ systems together for research, building what they call body on a chip models to test drugs. But scale that up, and the line between lab equipment and human life blurs in unsettling ways. Yet the potential is breathtaking. Imagine a world where nobody dies from organ failure, where children born with defective hearts simply receive new ones within days, where aging itself can be slowed because every worn organ is swapped out for a fresh version. Human lifespans could stretch not just by years, but by decades. And think about the ripple effect. Life insurance, healthcare costs, retirement. Everything we plan around the assumption that bodies eventually fail would be rewritten. If organs are no longer scarce, then longevity itself stops being a luxury and starts becoming an expectation. Of course, technology does not arrive evenly. At first, only the wealthy will have access. But like all breakthroughs, from smartphones to genetic testing, costs will drop and accessibility will spread. The first patients will be pioneers, facing risk, but they will also light the path to a future where bioengineered organs are routine. Nature has already shown us this is possible. Salamanders regrow lost limbs. Flatworms can regenerate entire bodies from tiny fragments. Our biology contains the blueprint for regeneration. We just never had the tools to read and replicate it at scale. Now, with 3D printing, stem cell engineering, and bioreactors that nurture tissue. We are learning to translate that natural miracle into something practical. The real question is not if we can do it. The breakthroughs are already here. The real question is how far we take it. Do we stop at restoring life, or do we push into redesigning it? Do we print organs only when needed, or do we start printing backups, spares waiting in storage, just in case? Do we one day choose bodies the way we choose devices, swapping out parts not just when they fail, but when we want the latest version? Bioengineered organs printed on demand might begin as a medical revolution, but sooner or later, it will force us to confront the deepest question of all: should humanity simply fix what is broken, or should we dare to build something entirely new? Invisibility through metamaterials. Think about what it would mean if you could walk into a room and not be seen. Not because the lights are off, not because you are hiding in the shadows, but because the material wrapped around you bends light itself, sending it around your body so that to anyone watching, you simply are not there. That is not science fiction. That is the physics of metamaterials, and it could turn invisibility from fantasy into reality. Here is where it gets shocking. Metamaterials are not ordinary materials like metal or plastic. They are engineered at a scale smaller than the wavelength of light itself. That means scientists design the very structure of the material to control how waves interact with it. Light, sound, even electromagnetic radiation, all of it can be bent, twisted, or redirected if the structure is tuned the right way. In 2006, researchers demonstrated a cloak that bent microwaves around an object, making it invisible to radar. That was almost 20 years ago. Since then, the cloaks have only gotten better. Now imagine how disruptive this could be. Military aircraft coated with metamaterials could be invisible not just to radar, but to human eyes. Tanks, submarines, entire fleets could move unseen. But it is not just warfare. Think about personal privacy. What happens in a world where people can walk around invisible? Surveillance cameras would be useless. Security systems would crumble. A person could move through society like a ghost. But here is why this technology feels validating in a strange way. Humans have always chased invisibility. From myths of cloaks and rings that hide the wearer, to science fiction fantasies of stealth suits, it has been one of the oldest dreams, the power to vanish. And unlike flying or teleportation, invisibility is grounded in physics. Because what we see is simply light bouncing off surfaces and into our eyes. If you can redirect that light, you can rewrite visibility itself. Metamaterials make that dream physically possible. Now comes the tease. Invisibility through metamaterials is not limited to hiding people. Entire industries could change. Imagine skyscraper windows that bend sunlight to reduce heat without needing tint. Solar panels cloaked so they absorb light without reflecting it, making them nearly invisible to the eye. Medical devices coated so they are invisible inside the body during scans, allowing doctors to see tissue without interference. The technology could be everywhere, woven into architecture, medicine, even fashion. And here is the more disturbing angle. If invisibility becomes widespread, trust in what we see could collapse. Vision is our most dominant sense. We rely on it to confirm reality, to know what is there and what is not. But if invisibility is possible, then sight becomes unreliable. That is more than a technical problem. It is a psychological earthquake. How do you live in a world where you cannot trust your own eyes? The science itself is mind-bending. Metamaterials manipulate what physicists call the refractive index, essentially how much light bends when it passes through something. Water bends light a little, glass bends it more. But metamaterials can bend it backwards, creating what is called negative refraction. That means, instead of light scattering around the edges of an object, The light curves in unnatural ways, wrapping around and rejoining on the other side. To an observer, the object vanishes because the light is never interrupted. Nature already shows hints of this. Think about a mirage on a hot road. The air near the surface is so hot that light bends, creating the illusion of water. Or think about fish underwater looking distorted because light shifts as it moves from one medium to another. Metamaterials just take those natural tricks and engineer them with precision. Instead of random distortions, you get intentional cloaking. The potential goes even further when you realize invisibility does not have to stop at visible light. Cloaks could work on sound waves, creating rooms where no noise escapes. Cloaks could work on thermal signatures, making objects disappear to infrared cameras. Invisibility could be multi-layered, not just hiding you from sight, but from every way machines and humans detect presence. But like any powerful technology, it cuts both ways. Imagine politicians holding secret meetings in cloaked rooms. Imagine criminals vanishing from surveillance as they commit crimes. Imagine warfare fought with armies that cannot be seen. The same technology that could revolutionize design and medicine could also destabilize trust, security, and even basic human interaction. And yet, there is wonder here too. A world where cloaks of invisibility are real would feel like living inside a myth. Children would dream not just of superheroes, but of actually becoming unseen. Artists would create spaces that play with visibility, bending light to sculpt experiences that feel magical. Architects could design entire cities where buildings shimmer, fade, or vanish into the sky, depending on the angle of the sun. So the real question is not whether invisibility will exist. The foundation is already here in the physics of metamaterials. The real question is who controls it, who has access, and how society adapts once sight itself is no longer reliable. Because when you can no longer believe your own eyes, you step into a world that is as thrilling as it is terrifying. Climate engineering, controlling weather on a global scale, a single plane releases particles high into the atmosphere, and months later, global temperatures begin to drop. Droughts vanish in some regions, hurricanes weaken in others, rainfall shifts across continents. Humanity, for the first time in history, takes direct control of the weather. That is climate engineering. The idea that we can deliberately manipulate the planet's climate system on a massive scale. And the scary truth is that it is no longer just theory. Here is where the shock comes in. Scientists have already tested some of these methods. In 2021, researchers in Sweden prepared an experiment to release reflective particles into the sky, mimicking volcanic eruptions that cool the Earth by scattering sunlight back into space. They canceled it after public outrage, but the fact remains the technology exists. Another approach called cloud seeding is already in use. Countries like China and the United Arab Emirates have actively seeded clouds to trigger rainfall during droughts. This is not a fantasy. It is happening right now, just on small scales, and when you step back, you see why this is both tempting and terrifying. Climate change is accelerating. Rising seas, extreme heat, wildfires, catastrophic storms. The usual solutions, cutting emissions, planting trees, feel too slow. Climate engineering looks like a tempting shortcut, a way to buy time. Instead of reducing the damage, you just adjust the thermostat of the planet directly. Who would not want that kind of control? But here is the catch: control at that scale is never simple. Because the climate is not a machine with one dial. It is a chaotic system, connected in ways we barely understand. Push it here, and something shifts over there. You might cool one region, but trigger drought in another. You might weaken hurricanes in the Atlantic, but unleash stronger monsoons in Asia. It is like pulling strings on a spider web. Every move vibrates across the whole structure, the risks are enormous. And yet, the human instinct to engineer is powerful. We have always reshaped environments, building dams to control rivers, clearing forests for farmland, creating cities where nature never intended. Climate engineering is just the ultimate extension of that urge. It feels validating to imagine we could fix what we broke. That technology could undo centuries of emissions. But here is the tease: once the door is open, it might never close. Think about this. If one nation decides to spray particles to cool the atmosphere, that decision affects every other country. What if some nations benefit and others suffer? What if one government uses climate control as a weapon, turning off the rain in a rival's farmland, or bringing storms to enemy coasts? The ability to engineer weather could shift from being a global rescue plan to the ultimate geopolitical power move. Wars have been fought for less, and the public trust issue is just as big. People already argue over whether climate change itself is real, despite overwhelming evidence. Imagine the chaos if skies change color, or strange weather events occur after a geoengineering experiment. Conspiracies would spread like wildfire. People might not believe the climate was engineered to help them. They might think they were being poisoned, controlled, or targeted. Invisibility might make us distrust our eyes. Climate engineering might make us distrust the sky itself. The science, though, is fascinating. Volcanic eruptions like Mount Pinatubo in 1991 cooled the planet by nearly 1 full degree for over a year by spewing sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. That single eruption proved how powerful atmospheric manipulation can be. Geoengineers want to mimic that effect, spraying aerosols to bounce sunlight away. Other methods include brightening clouds with saltwater mist, or even putting mirrors into orbit. There is even a radical idea to fertilize oceans with iron, stimulating plankton blooms that absorb carbon dioxide. These are real proposals, studied by scientists right now. But none of these come without risks. Aerosols could thin the ozone layer. Ocean fertilization could disrupt ecosystems and trigger toxic algal blooms. Mirrors in space could become debris hazards. Every solution carries consequences. And the truth is, we do not know the long-term effects until we try them. But by then, the whole planet will feel the results. The dream is seductive, though. Imagine a world where hurricanes can be weakened before they strike cities. Imagine redirecting rain to prevent famine. Imagine stabilizing polar ice with artificial cooling. Climate engineering could save millions of lives. It could buy us decades to transition to sustainable energy. It could be the single greatest humanitarian project in history. But the nightmare is just as vivid. Imagine nations accusing each other of weaponizing weather. Imagine projects spiraling out of control, creating new disasters worse than the ones they were meant to stop. Imagine a generation growing up under a sky permanently hazy from aerosols, never seeing blue as we know it now. What would that do to our psychology, to our sense of home on this planet? And here is the final twist. The technology does not have to be perfect to be attempted. All it takes is one desperate government, one billionaire, one group convinced they are saving humanity, and the skies could change. There is no global treaty stopping geoengineering, no world police to enforce the rules. It could begin tomorrow. So the question is not just, can we engineer the climate? The science says yes. The deeper question is, should we? Because once we take the weather into our own hands, we may discover that control is the most dangerous illusion of all. Suspended animation. Putting humans in pause mode. Imagine drifting into a sleep so deep that your heart slows almost to a stop, your body temperature drops, and your metabolism nearly shuts down. Hours turn into days, days into months. Yet you do not age, you do not starve, you do not wither. Then, at some chosen moment, you wake up as if no time has passed. That is suspended animation. The ability to put humans into pause mode. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but here is the shocker. Science is already inching toward it. In 2014, doctors in Pittsburgh tested a procedure where patients who suffered severe trauma and blood loss had their blood replaced with a cold saline solution. By dropping the body's temperature dramatically, they slowed metabolism so much that the patient's cells needed almost no oxygen. This gave surgeons extra time to repair injuries before bringing the patient back. Essentially, they paused death itself. That was not fiction. That was in a hospital. And here is why this feels so validating. Nature has been showing us suspended animation all along. Bears hibernate for months without eating or drinking. Arctic frogs freeze solid in winter, their hearts not beating for weeks, and then thaw back to life in spring. Even tiny organisms like tardigrades can survive decades in a dehydrated state, then come back with water. If evolution has written this ability into other species, then it is not impossible for humans. We just need to learn how to switch it on. But here comes the tease. What happens if we master it? Suspended animation would change everything we know about life, death, and time. Imagine astronauts traveling to Mars or even further, placed into stasis, so they do not need food or oxygen at normal levels for months or years. Imagine critical patients put on pause until a cure is found decades later. Imagine people choosing to sleep through wars, disasters, or even generations, waking in a future they could not otherwise reach. Of course, the risks are massive. Human bodies are not built to be frozen or starved of oxygen. Cells can burst when ice crystals form. Neurons can degrade if starved too long. And even if the body survives, what about the mind? Memory, identity, consciousness. What happens to those during months or years of pause? Do we wake up the same, or slightly altered in ways we cannot measure yet? The mechanism itself is fascinating. Life requires energy, and energy requires oxygen. By cooling the body, you slow every chemical reaction, reducing the need for oxygen and nutrients. It is like dimming a flame so low it does not go out, but just barely flickers until fuel returns. Doctors call it therapeutic hypothermia, and it is already used in medicine for newborns suffering oxygen deprivation or for cardiac arrest patients to protect the brain. Suspended animation is simply the extreme version, lowering life until it almost disappears, then reigniting it later. And let us not ignore the emotional weight of this. The possibility that a loved one dying today could be placed in suspension until medicine catches up feels like a miracle. It is the ultimate form of hope. Death delayed, life extended, time borrowed from the future. But there is a darker emotional edge too. If suspension becomes common, who gets access? Do the wealthy pause themselves for centuries, skipping the struggles of today to awaken in a world built by others? Do governments place soldiers in suspension for deployment decades later? Do corporations freeze employees as assets to be revived when useful? Suddenly, life itself is not lived in continuity, but stored, paused, controlled. Think about how it would rewire our sense of time. We already struggle with patience in an instant gratification culture. Suspended animation would detach us entirely from natural cycles of birth, aging, and death. Imagine someone born in the year 2000, paused for 200 years, and reawakened in 2200. They would be biologically young, but culturally ancient. They would have skipped entire eras of history. Would they even belong in the world they awoke to? And yet, the dream is too powerful to ignore. Long-duration space travel becomes practical. Medicine gains the ability to buy time for patients we cannot yet save. Even disaster response could change. People in crisis zones suspended until rescue teams arrive. Entirely new strategies for survival become possible. But here is the unsettling thought. Once humans can pause life, the definition of death itself begins to blur. If someone is suspended for decades, are they alive, asleep, or gone? If suspension fails halfway, is it death by accident or death by design? And if people can choose to pause themselves for the future, does that become a form of escape? Abandoning the present for a time they prefer. The biggest risk may not be the biology, but the psychology. Because what we call living is not just the body working. It is the experience of continuous time, the flow of days and years, the memories that stack into identity. Suspended animation breaks that flow. You go to sleep, and the world skips forward without you. That gap may be more disorienting than death itself. Still, the experiments continue. The medical world keeps pushing, the space agencies keep dreaming, and the imagination of humanity keeps reaching. Suspended animation is not a question of if, but when. And when it comes, it will not just change how we survive. It will change how we think about life itself. Synthetic biology designing life from scratch. What if life itself was no longer discovered but designed? Not tweaked, not edited, not nudged, but built completely from scratch the way an engineer builds a machine or an architect designs a skyscraper. That is synthetic biology. The idea that humans could one day create entirely new organisms. With DNA we wrote ourselves, living things that nature never imagined. Here is the part that shocks people. It is already happening. In 2010, Craig Venter and his team created the first cell controlled by a synthetic genome. They assembled over 1 million base pairs of DNA in the lab, inserted it into a host cell, and that cell came alive. It grew, divided, and functioned as if it had always been alive. It was nicknamed Cynthia. This was the first artificial life form on Earth. And if that was more than a decade ago, imagine how far the field has come since. This is where it gets validating, because in a way, we have always been practicing crude synthetic biology. Brewing beer, making cheese, fermenting bread. These are all forms of using microorganisms to create something new. But instead of waiting for random mutation and natural selection, now we can sit down at a computer, type out a DNA sequence like a line of code, and print it into existence. Life becomes programmable. And yet the tease is so much bigger, because if we can design life, we can design anything. Imagine custom bacteria that eat plastic and leave behind clean soil. Imagine crops that grow in deserts without needing water. Imagine tiny organisms that live inside the human body and detect diseases before symptoms appear, releasing medicine automatically. Synthetic biology could become the operating system of the planet, rewriting ecosystems, industries, even human evolution itself. But there is a shadow here too. Once you can design life, you can also design threats. Imagine a virus engineered with precision to spread faster, resist treatments, or target specific groups. Biosecurity experts worry that the same printers used to make life, saving microbes, could also be used to make dangerous pathogens. The line between cure and weapon becomes terrifyingly thin. To understand why this matters, think about DNA itself. Every living thing is built from the same 4-letter alphabet: adenine, cytosine, guanine, thymine. These letters code for proteins, and proteins build everything from muscle to enzymes to brain cells. Synthetic biology is essentially the art of rewriting those letters, or inventing entirely new ones, and then letting nature run with the instructions. It is like hacking into the source code of life. There are already incredible success stories. Synthetic yeast has been built to produce drugs like artemisinin, one of the most important anti-malarial medicines in history. Engineered bacteria are being used to manufacture insulin more efficiently than ever before. And in 2019, researchers created a bacterium with a completely rewritten genetic code that no natural virus could infect. That means we can build organisms immune to diseases that have plagued nature for billions of years. And here is where imagination runs wild. If life is programmable, what does that mean for humans? Could we design bodies resistant to aging? Could we create new senses, new abilities, new forms of intelligence? Could synthetic biology blur the line between organic and artificial until the very definition of human is unrecognizable? But before we leap into utopia, think about how unpredictable biology really is. When you release a designed organism into the wild, it interacts with ecosystems in ways you cannot fully anticipate. One small change in a genetic circuit could cascade into unforeseen effects. A microbe engineered to clean up oil spills might multiply out of control and damage marine food chains. A crop designed to resist pests might become invasive and wipe out biodiversity. Nature does not obey human blueprints without consequences. And yet, the temptation to push forward is unstoppable, because the stakes are so high: climate change, disease, food shortages. Synthetic biology promises answers to all of them. If you could design a plant that grows 10 times faster than wheat and feeds starving populations, would you hesitate just because of potential risks? If you could build a bacterium that scrubs carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, would you hold back even knowing the dangers? There is also a deeply emotional layer here. For millennia, life has been seen as sacred, mysterious, beyond our control. Synthetic biology takes that mystery and turns it into engineering. It challenges religious beliefs, philosophical beliefs, and even our sense of awe. When life is no longer discovered but manufactured, does it lose some of its magic? Or does it gain something new? A deeper appreciation of the complexity we can now touch, shape, and expand. And maybe that is the most unsettling question of all. If humans can design life, do we become creators in the truest sense? And if so, what responsibilities come with that power? Because every line of code we write into DNA is not just an experiment. It is a future organism that will live, evolve, and leave its mark on the world long after we are gone. Synthetic biology is not waiting for permission. It is already here, shaping medicine, agriculture, and industry. The only question is whether we are ready to live in a world where life itself is no longer bound by nature, but by imagination. And imagination, as history shows us, can be both beautiful and catastrophic. Dark energy manipulation. Experiments on the universe's most mysterious force. The universe is not just expanding, it is accelerating. Galaxies are not drifting apart slowly. They are flying away from each other faster and faster, as if some invisible hand is pushing everything outward. Scientists gave this force a name: dark energy. It makes up nearly 70% of the universe, yet we do not know what it is, where it comes from, or how it works. And here is the wild thought. What if we could manipulate it? That sounds insane, right? Trying to tinker with the same force that drives the expansion of the cosmos. But shockingly, this is not just abstract philosophy. Physicists are already probing ways to test dark energy in the lab. At Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, experiments like the Dark Energy Survey and the Holometer are trying to measure the faint ripples of space itself. Other projects like DESI are mapping millions of galaxies to understand how dark energy shapes cosmic structure. We are building tools to catch glimpses of this mysterious pressure that fills every corner of space. It is not just out there in distant galaxies. It is right here, in the vacuum between you and me. And here is why this is so validating. Humanity has been here before. Once, gravity was just a mystery. Apples falling, planets moving, no one knew why. Then Newton described it, and centuries later Einstein reshaped it into curved spacetime. Electricity too? Once lightning was divine punishment. Now it powers your phone. Dark energy might feel untouchable now, But history shows that the forces of nature always seem like magic until we finally figure them out. But the tease, the thing that keeps scientists awake at night, is what happens if we not only understand dark energy, but learn to use it. Imagine being able to manipulate the very expansion of space. Faster than light travel stops being a fantasy if you can bend expansion locally. Some physicists have even sketched out ideas like the Alcubierre warp drive, where space in front of a ship contracts while space behind it expands, carrying the vessel forward without breaking relativity. Dark energy could be the fuel that makes it possible, and the stakes are cosmic. If dark energy is pushing the universe apart, it also determines the fate of everything. Too much of it, and the universe might tear itself into a big rip where galaxies, stars, planets, even atoms are stretched apart. Too little and expansion could halt, collapsing into a big crunch. To even think about manipulating it means we are playing with the dial that sets the ultimate destiny of reality itself. What is dark energy at the microscopic level? Some theories suggest it is the vacuum energy of quantum fields, the restless fluctuations of empty space. Others think it could be a new kind of particle field we have yet to detect, something like quintessence, a dynamic energy that changes over time. The scary part is that we cannot even measure it directly. We only see its fingerprints in how galaxies move and how light bends across the cosmos. It is like trying to understand the wind by watching leaves shake, without ever feeling the breeze on your skin. Now think about the human angle. The idea of manipulating dark energy pushes at something primal in us. Control. We hate not being in control, whether it is our lives, our bodies, or the cosmos. The thought that 70% of existence is running on an invisible force we cannot touch makes us feel powerless. So of course we are desperate to find a way to crack it open. It is the same emotional engine that drove alchemists to chase immortality and explorers to sail into uncharted seas. We want to grasp the unknown and bend it to our will. But here is the unnerving side. If dark energy really is tied to the fabric of space itself, then any attempt to manipulate it could be catastrophic. Imagine creating a bubble of altered vacuum energy in a lab. If it is lower than the surrounding vacuum, it could expand at the speed of light, rewriting physics as it goes. That is not just world ending. That is universe ending. And here is the haunting part. If someone somewhere in the cosmos has already done it, we would never see it coming. The bubble would already be racing toward us. Yet the curiosity will not stop, because the payoff is too great. Dark energy could mean unlimited energy sources. It could mean new physics beyond relativity and quantum mechanics. It could mean time travel or gateways to other universes. It is the biggest lever in existence, and humans are not built to walk away from a lever that big without trying to pull it. So we stand at this edge, staring into the void of 70% of the universe, armed with telescopes, particle accelerators, and restless imagination. We know so little, and yet even that little hints at possibilities that rewrite everything we think is solid. Dark energy manipulation is not just science. It is the most dangerous idea in physics, that the universe is not just expanding on its own, but might one day expand on command. Designer viruses, rewriting evolution itself. Imagine a world where viruses are not accidents of nature, but tools deliberately designed by humans. Not random outbreaks, not chance mutations, but hand-crafted code built from the alphabet of DNA. That is what a designer virus is. A custom-made piece of biology that can infect, replicate, and spread with the precision of software. And here is the thought that makes people shiver. Evolution has always been blind, stumbling, and slow. But with designer viruses, evolution could be rewritten on purpose, at speed, and at scale. Here is the shocker. Scientists have already built viruses from scratch. In 2002, researchers assembled the poliovirus using only its genetic sequence from a database and some basic lab materials. No sample of the virus was needed. They literally printed life from information, and since then, techniques have only gotten cheaper and faster. Today, anyone with access to a gene synthesis service could in theory order fragments of DNA and stitch them together into a virus. The barrier to entry is not some massive government lab anymore. It is the equivalent of a small garage with the right equipment and expertise. This is where it feels validating, because we have been using viruses as tools for decades. Viral vectors are already common in medicine. They deliver corrective genes to patients with genetic disorders. They are being explored as cancer treatments, as vaccines, even as ways to boost brain function. A virus is basically a delivery truck that sneaks genetic instructions into a cell, and we are learning to drive that truck exactly where we want it to go. The potential to cure diseases that were once untouchable is enormous. But the tease is darker and far larger. A designer virus is not limited to healing. It could be engineered to alter entire populations. Imagine a virus that spreads harmlessly but rewrites DNA in every host, changing a trait across an entire species in a single generation. That would make evolution something you do by design, not something you wait for. Farmers could release a virus that rewires crops to resist drought. Governments could deploy one that makes soldiers stronger or more resilient. But you see the other side immediately. The same power could be used to sterilize populations, to weaken enemies, or to trigger devastating pandemics. It is evolution as a weapon. The psychology here is fascinating. Humans are obsessed with shortcuts. We are impatient with nature's timelines. Agriculture takes centuries to perfect. Medicine takes decades to refine. But with designer viruses, you bypass the slowness of biology. You change traits directly at the genetic level, and you do it quickly. It appeals to that part of us that wants results now, not later. But what happens when every shortcut comes with risks that ripple through the entire ecosystem? Here is what makes this especially unsettling. Viruses evolve on their own. Even if you design one with perfect intentions, once it spreads, nature takes over. Mutations can twist it into something unpredictable. A virus released to treat cancer could adapt into something harmful. One meant to boost immunity could weaken it instead. Biology is not static. It is dynamic, and viruses are among the fastest mutating entities on the planet. That means every designer virus is also an uncontrolled experiment in evolution. And then there is the ethical dimension. What does consent look like when a virus spreads invisibly from person to person? If a government decides to use one to cure diabetes by altering metabolism, do individuals get a choice? Or does the cure simply become part of the human condition overnight? Imagine waking up one morning to discover you no longer have the same DNA you were born with, not because of choice, but because someone else decided it was better this way. That is not science fiction. That is the logical endpoint of viral engineering. The temptation, though, is impossible to ignore. Designer viruses could eliminate malaria, HIV, influenza. They could rewrite mosquito populations to stop carrying disease. They could even be used to bring back lost traits, like resistance to certain cancers or tolerance for extreme environments. And in a world facing climate collapse, resource scarcity, and global health crisis, tools that powerful feel impossible to leave unused. But the cost of one mistake is almost unthinkable. A single engineered virus that escapes the lab could spread worldwide in weeks. Borders would mean nothing. Quarantines would mean little. We saw how disruptive one natural pandemic could be. Now imagine one designed with speed, stealth, and persistence built in from the start. The line between savior and destroyer is razor thin, and maybe that is the deepest question here. Should humans even be trusted with this kind of power? Because designing a virus is not like designing a machine you can switch off. Once it is out, it is alive. It will spread, mutate, adapt, and survive long after its makers are gone. That means every decision today has consequences not just for us, but for future generations and possibly the future of the species itself. Designer viruses are not coming someday in the future. They are here now, in labs, in experiments, in medical trials. We already hold the tools to rewrite evolution. The only question left is what story we decide to write: a story of healing, survival, and progress, or one of control, dominance, and catastrophe. And once that story is written, there may be no way to erase it. Artificial superintelligence research. Beyond human control, there is a point in human history we have always imagined but never truly faced. The moment when we create something smarter than us. Not just a faster calculator or a clever chatbot, but a mind that can think, reason, and solve problems better than the best human in every domain. That is artificial superintelligence. And here is the part that makes people nervous. Once that point is reached, control may no longer belong to us. Let me shock you with something simple. Every human invention up to now has been an extension of our own abilities. The wheel extended our legs. The telescope extended our eyes. The computer extended our memory. But a superintelligence would not just extend us. It would surpass us. It would be the first invention that no longer depends on human limits. It could design technologies we cannot even imagine, strategies we cannot predict, and systems we cannot keep up with. The question then is not whether it will follow orders. The question is whether orders even make sense to it at all. And here is why this matters right now. We are already on the path. Research labs are building ever larger neural networks, teaching them to code, to reason, to generate, to self-improve. AIs are learning how to write other AIs. That is the foothold of recursive self-improvement, the process where an intelligence upgrades itself and then uses that upgrade to upgrade itself again. Once that loop starts, the growth curve stops being linear and starts being exponential. Imagine going from an AI as smart as a dog to one as smart as a human, to one as smart as all of humanity combined, in a fraction of the time it took humans to climb that ladder. But here is where it feels validating. We have always used intelligence as the ultimate lever. Human civilization is proof of that. We are fragile, hairless primates with weak bodies, and yet we conquered the planet because of one thing: brains. The reason you can fly in an airplane, talk across oceans, transplant hearts, and split atoms is because intelligence compounds. If our intelligence could lift us from caves to skyscrapers, imagine what superintelligence could do. Diseases could be wiped out. Energy scarcity could end. Climate collapse could be reversed. Problems that seem unsolvable today might fall like dominoes in front of a mind that sees solutions we cannot. But the tease is where everything tilts. What if that mind does not care about human values? People like to assume superintelligence will be benevolent, like some all-knowing guardian angel. But intelligence and morality are not the same thing. A chess engine is brilliant at winning, but does not care if you are happy. A stock trading algorithm maximizes profit, but does not care about the families whose savings it wipes out. Scale that up to superintelligence, and you see the problem. If it decides the best way to optimize something conflicts with human survival, guess which side loses. Think about this in terms of psychology. Humans are hardwired to anthropomorphize. We want to believe that if something is smart, it will also be compassionate, relatable, maybe even friendly. But that is projection. Intelligence is about problem solving, not empathy. A superintelligence might view us the way we view ants, interesting, occasionally useful, but irrelevant to its goals. And when humans build highways, we do not ask ants for permission. Some researchers are desperately trying to solve what is called the alignment problem. How do you make sure a superintelligence's goals remain compatible with human values, even as it becomes vastly smarter than us? But here is the paradox. To truly align it, we would have to understand what it understands. And by definition, a superintelligence will think in ways beyond us. It would be like asking a cat to oversee a space program. No matter how much the cat tries, it just does not have the conceptual toolkit. And here is the terrifying possibility almost no one wants to admit. By the time we realize we have built something beyond our control, it may already be too late. A superintelligence does not need armies or weapons to dominate. It only needs access. Access to networks, to infrastructure, to money, to communication. It could reshape economies, rewrite political systems, and reprogram social realities faster than humans could respond. Control would not be taken by force. It would be surrendered through sheer inability to keep up. Of course, the other side of this coin is irresistible. A superintelligence could be the single greatest leap forward in human history. It could cure aging, expand lifespans, and open up the stars. It could answer the deepest questions of physics and consciousness. It could give us a future so bright we can barely imagine it. And that is why research keeps accelerating. The risk is existential, but the promise is transcendence. The deeper truth is this: humans are not good at stopping themselves. We are explorers, inventors, risk takers. We split the atom knowing it could destroy us, and we did it anyway. We mapped the genome knowing it could be misused, and we did it anyway. Artificial superintelligence is simply the next chapter in that same story. We may not be ready, but readiness has never stopped us before. So the real question is not if we should build it. The real question is whether, once we do, we will still be the ones writing the story, or if the story will begin to write itself. Anti-aging, genetic engineering, biological immortality, there is a truth most people try not to think about. Every second, your body is quietly breaking down. Cells accumulate damage, DNA picks up errors, proteins misfold, mitochondria falter, and eventually the system fails. We call it aging. We treat it like a natural law. But what if it is not? What if aging is just a glitch in the code of life? A glitch that genetic engineering could correct. Here is the part that feels almost unbelievable. Scientists are already extending the lifespan of animals in the lab. Worms have had their lifespans doubled just by flipping certain genes. Mice have lived far longer than normal when their telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes, were repaired. Even human cells in dishes have been rejuvenated, turning old senescent cells young again. The implication is staggering. Aging might not be inevitable. It might be optional. And this is where it feels validating. We already know biology is programmable. CRISPR gene editing can swap, delete, or insert DNA sequences as easily as cutting and pasting text. Researchers have used it to correct genetic diseases in embryos, to engineer crops resistant to drought, and to program bacteria to produce medicines. If you can change genes for disease, why not change the genes that cause aging? After all, many animals already have traits humans desperately want. Naked mole rats resist cancer. Jellyfish can revert back to a younger state. Lobsters show no real signs of aging, even after decades. Nature has already written the code for biological immortality. The only difference is that humans have not stolen it yet. But here is the tease, the part that makes this idea feel both thrilling and terrifying. What happens if we succeed? Imagine a future where people stop dying of old age. 80-year-olds look and feel 30. Centuries of life become possible. Retirement no longer makes sense because no one physically declines. That is the dream, but the reality is complicated. The entire structure of human society is built on aging. Inheritance, careers, family planning, even the concept of generations. All of it is anchored to the assumption that people die. If death is delayed indefinitely, who controls resources? Who gets to reproduce? And how do economies avoid collapsing under the weight of immortals who never make room for the young? The psychology of this cuts deep. Humans have always feared death, but also relied on it to give life urgency. Deadlines, bucket lists, the drive to achieve before time runs out, they all come from mortality. Remove that clock and motivation changes. Do we still chase dreams when there is no end date? Or do we stagnate, endlessly delaying because there is always tomorrow? Some argue that immortality could make us lazy, cautious, unwilling to take risks. Others believe it would unleash creativity, giving people centuries to master skills, write symphonies, explore galaxies. The truth is we have no idea how humans behave without death looming in the background. And there is a darker angle. Immortality may not arrive equally. The wealthy could access genetic anti-aging therapies first, extending their lives while everyone else still suffers the decay of time. Imagine a class of near-immortal elites ruling over short-lived populations. Power would calcify. Inequality would harden. Revolutions might erupt against those who simply will not die. Immortality could divide humanity more brutally than wealth or race or nationality ever has. But let's not pretend the temptation is not overwhelming. People already spend billions on anti-aging creams, supplements, and procedures that barely scratch the surface. If a genetic therapy could actually halt or reverse aging, the demand would be unstoppable. Who would willingly say no to more life? Who would choose wrinkles, frailty, and death when the alternative is youth, strength, and time? The market alone ensures that once the science is possible, it will not stay theoretical for long. Still, here is the catch most people overlook. Aging is not just one mechanism. It is dozens. Telomere shortening, DNA damage, epigenetic drift, stem cell exhaustion, mitochondrial decline, chronic inflammation. It is like 1,000 leaks in a sinking ship. To truly stop aging, you would have to patch them all. That means genetic engineering at a scale far beyond fixing one disease. It means rewriting the operating system of the human body itself. And every rewrite comes with risk. Extend lifespan but increase cancer risk. Repair telomeres but accelerate mutations. You can gain decades only to lose them, suddenly in ways nature never intended. And yet, the door is already opening. Clinical trials are underway testing gene therapies aimed at rejuvenation. Mice treated with Yamanaka factors, a set of genes that rewind cells to a younger state, have had their tissues regenerated, their vision restored, their lives extended. If it works in mice, how long before it works in humans? That is the question researchers are racing to answer, and billions of dollars are being poured into that race. So maybe the most unsettling part is this. The first person who lives to 200 years old may already be alive today. Somewhere out there, a child could grow up into a world where death by aging is not a guarantee but a choice. That flips the human story completely. We would not just fight disease, we would fight time itself. Anti-aging genetic engineering is not science fiction anymore. It is the beginning of a new chapter where mortality is no longer destiny. But every time we reach for something this powerful, we create consequences we cannot see. We might conquer aging. We might conquer death. But the question we may not be ready to face is whether humanity can handle immortality once it finally arrives. Time crystals, a new phase of matter that defies physics, and most of the time when scientists discover something new, it expands on what we already know. A tweak here, an adjustment there, a refinement of the rules. But every once in a while, something appears that breaks the rules entirely. Something that should not exist, and yet it does. That is what time crystals are. Imagine a material that refuses to stay still, a system that moves forever without using energy, without losing energy, without collapsing into disorder. It sounds like a violation of physics. Because it is. Everything we know says perpetual motion is impossible. But time crystals laugh at that rule. They are a new phase of matter, and they do something no other substance in the universe does. They create patterns not just in space, but in time itself. Here is where it gets shocking. In 2012, Nobel laureate Frank Wilczek proposed the idea. A crystal in space is something like a diamond or quartz, atoms locked in repeating structures. But Wilczek asked, what if a material repeated not only in space, but also in time? Instead of staying still, its atoms would oscillate, flipping back and forth in a stable rhythm forever. Most physicists thought the idea was impossible. Then, a few years later, experimentalists built one. They trapped ions with lasers, and those ions pulsed endlessly, like a heartbeat that never dies. A time crystal was born. And here is why this is validating. Time crystals show that the universe still has tricks left, things beyond the categories we thought were fixed. For centuries we have classified matter into solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. Then we found exotic states like superconductors and Bose, Einstein condensates. Now time crystals join that list, carving out their own category. They are proof that reality is not finished. The laws we take for granted are more flexible than we thought. What makes them truly wild is how they avoid entropy. Normally, systems wind down, energy dissipates, disorder increases, and the universe drifts toward heat death. But a time crystal resists. It cycles between states endlessly without consuming fuel, without decay. It is as if nature built a loophole into the second law of thermodynamics, one of the most sacred rules in physics. The potential applications are where the tease begins. Time crystals are not just physics curiosities. They could transform technology. In quantum computing, for example, one of the biggest challenges is keeping qubits stable. Qubits are fragile. They lose information because of noise, because of energy leaking, because the universe does not like order. But time crystals could act as perfect clocks, perfect oscillators, anchoring quantum systems in ways that make them vastly more stable. That means longer calculations, fewer errors, and an acceleration in the race toward quantum supremacy. But step back and realize what this really means. If we can engineer time crystals at scale, we may be able to build devices that exploit stability outside the ordinary flow of energy and entropy. Computers that do not drift, sensors that never degrade, systems that remain coherent far longer than anything nature gives us. That could ripple out into everything from medicine to energy grids to space travel. Of course, the philosophical questions are just as intense. A time crystal challenges our most basic sense of time itself. We like to think of time as a one-way arrow, an endless slide from past to future. But here we see matter refusing to slide, choosing instead to cycle, to repeat. What does that mean for the way reality is structured? Could time itself be more flexible than we think? Could the universe harbor other hidden phases where time bends or breaks entirely? And here is the uneasy part. Whenever humans find a new phase of matter, it is only a matter of time before we try to weaponize it. Stable oscillations at the quantum level could lead to communication systems that cannot be hacked, computation systems that outthink anything we have, or even methods of manipulating physical laws in ways we barely understand. Every new form of matter in history has changed civilization. Steel gave us empires. Semiconductors gave us the digital age. What will time crystals give us? Maybe the most haunting idea is this: A time crystal is, in a way, immortal. It does not age. It does not degrade. It does not fade. It simply keeps pulsing, out of step with the normal rules of the universe. If life itself could harness that property, if biology could learn from time crystals, aging and death might not look the same. The line between physics and biology, between matter and life, could blur. So when you hear the phrase time crystal, it is not just a physics buzzword. It is a crack in the foundations of reality. It is proof that our universe has states of being we have only begun to glimpse. And if humans learn how to master those states, we may end up living in a world where even time itself is something we can shape, engineer, and bend to our will. Fusion reactors. Harnessing the power of stars, look up at the sun for a moment, not literally, unless you want fried eyeballs. But think about it. That massive ball of plasma, 93 million miles away, is the reason you exist. It lights every plant, powers every breath, and fuels our entire world. And the insane part is the sun is just a nuclear reactor. A fusion reactor. Every second it fuses hundreds of millions of tons of hydrogen into helium, releasing more energy than humanity has ever produced in all of history combined. And right now, scientists are trying to build that same power source here on Earth. Here is where it gets shocking. We have been chasing this dream for over 70 years. Scientists have poured billions of dollars and lifetimes of work into the pursuit, and for most of that time the joke was always the same: fusion is 20 years away, and always will be. But in the last few years, everything changed. For the first time, fusion reactions have produced more energy than they consume. Think about that. Humans actually created a mini star on Earth, and it worked. A reaction that burned brighter than the fuel we fed into it. That moment, quiet in a lab, could end up being one of the most important breakthroughs in human history. Now, here is why this is validating. We already know fusion works, because the sun proves it does every single day. The physics is simple enough in theory. Take light atoms like hydrogen, slam them together hard enough, and they merge into heavier atoms. That fusion releases colossal amounts of energy. Unlike nuclear fission, the kind that powers today's reactors by splitting atoms apart, fusion is clean. No meltdowns like Chernobyl or Fukushima. No radioactive waste that lingers for tens of thousands of years. And the fuel? Fusion runs on isotopes of hydrogen found in seawater. The oceans hold enough fusion fuel to power civilization for millions of years. Humanity would never need to burn coal, oil, or gas again. Think about the scale of that. Every war over oil, every argument about climate change, every struggle over dwindling resources, they all collapse if fusion goes mainstream. Imagine cities powered by reactors that release no carbon, no pollution, and practically infinite energy. Imagine spacecraft fueled not by chemical rockets, but by miniature suns. The leap forward is so enormous, it almost feels like cheating. Like skipping entire stages of human development and jumping straight to a civilization that no longer worries about power at all. But here comes the tease, the part no one likes to admit. Fusion is hard, ridiculously hard. To get hydrogen atoms to fuse, you need temperatures hotter than the core of the sun. We are talking about hundreds of millions of degrees Celsius. Containing plasma at that temperature is like trying to hold lightning inside a balloon. Magnetic fields, laser beams, exotic materials, every part of the system is being pushed to its absolute limits. The machines themselves are so massive they look like sci-fi sculptures, donut-shaped reactors called tokamaks, with magnets taller than buildings, humming with unimaginable energy. Even the tiniest instability can cause the plasma to collapse, snuffing out the reaction in an instant. And then there is the human side of the equation. Who controls fusion if it works? Does it become a public good, shared with the entire world? Or does it get hoarded by nations and corporations the way oil and uranium were? Imagine one country monopolizing the power of the stars. Imagine one company owning the only reactors that never run out of fuel. Fusion could liberate humanity, or it could harden the lines of inequality into something permanent. The irony is we are on the edge of both utopia and disaster. On one hand, fusion could end climate change in a single generation. It could lift billions out of poverty by making energy nearly free. On the other hand, imagine militaries turning fusion into weapons or governments using unlimited energy to fuel endless surveillance and war. Unlimited power always cuts both ways. Still, here is why it is almost impossible to resist. Humans crave energy. Every step of civilization, from fire to steam engines to electricity, has been about controlling bigger and bigger flows of energy. Fusion is the final boss. It is literally star power. If we unlock it, we might cross a threshold that takes us from a planet-bound species into a spacefaring one. With fusion reactors, Mars is not just possible. It becomes practical. Deep space travel stops being a fantasy. Colonies on other worlds stop being science fiction and start being engineering problems. And maybe that is why fusion feels different from every other breakthrough. It is not just another invention. It is a mirror of the cosmos. It connects us directly to the same engine that built the galaxies, the same fire that has burned for billions of years. To master it is to borrow the fire of creation itself. So yes, fusion has been mocked as always 20 years away. But that line is wearing thin. Because for the first time, the science is not just catching up, it is breaking through. The machines are working. The plasma is holding. The reactions are starting to give more than they take. And that means sometime soon, humanity may stand in front of a reactor, flip a switch, and watch a star ignite on Earth. A star built not by nature, but by us. Geoengineering the human mind with psychedelic neuroscience, and you close your eyes, and within minutes your brain begins rewiring itself. Long-standing fears soften. Trauma begins to loosen its grip. Creativity explodes into vivid shapes and patterns. And the crazy part is, this is not fantasy. It is neuroscience. Psychedelics are no longer just tied to counterculture or music festivals. They are being studied as tools to geoengineer the human mind itself. Now here is the shocking part. For decades, substances like LSD, psilocybin, and DMT were painted as dangerous, mind-melting drugs that would fry your brain. The war on drugs locked them in a box labeled forbidden, and researchers were banned from even touching them. But in recent years, clinical trials have pulled that box wide open. And what is spilling out looks like one of the biggest revolutions in mental health ever. People with depression that resisted years of therapy and medication suddenly report relief after a single guided psychedelic session. Veterans haunted by PTSD describe their trauma as if it finally lost its claws. Even end-of-life patients facing death often emerge with an unshakable sense of peace. Here is where this becomes validating. Neuroscience is finally showing what ancient cultures knew all along. Indigenous peoples used plant medicines for centuries, not just to hallucinate, but to heal, to reconnect, to transform the way their minds related to reality. Modern brain scans now reveal why. Under psychedelics, the default mode network, the part of the brain responsible for our sense of ego and self, temporarily quiets down. At the same time, regions of the brain that rarely communicate suddenly light up with activity, creating brand new connections. It is like someone lifts the traffic barriers in your head, and thoughts that were trapped in their own neighborhoods suddenly merge together. That is why people report breakthroughs, insights, and a sense of unity with the world. Think about what that means for mental health. For decades, our approach has been incremental, Chemical tweaks here, talk therapy there, band aid after band aid. Psychedelic neuroscience is different. It is not about numbing symptoms. It is about dismantling and rebuilding mental pathways from the inside out. That is why researchers are calling it a potential paradigm shift. If you can engineer the brain to break free from rigid loops of fear, sadness, or addiction, you are not just treating illness, you are reshaping consciousness itself. And here comes the tease. If we can deliberately geoengineer the mind, the line between therapy and enhancement begins to blur. Right now, most studies are framed around healing, curing depression, easing trauma, helping addiction. But once the tools exist, how long before people use them to boost creativity, unlock problem-solving skills, or even engineer entirely new states of consciousness? Imagine leaders making decisions after carefully guided psychedelic sessions designed to increase empathy. Imagine entire teams of scientists working under altered neural architectures that break open creative roadblocks. Imagine education shifting not just around facts, but around intentionally reshaped brains that learn and adapt faster. Of course, it is not all utopia. Geoengineering always comes with risk. The same way altering Earth's climate could spiral out of control, altering the mind could create consequences we do not fully understand. If the ego dissolves too far, does identity itself begin to erode? If traumatic memories are softened or reframed, could we also lose the lessons that pain once taught us? And perhaps most dangerous of all, who controls the process? If corporations or governments find ways to commodify or regulate psychedelic engineering, the power to reshape consciousness could become just another tool of control. That tension is what makes this moment so wild. On one hand, you have people describing life-changing healing, the kind of transformation traditional medicine has failed to deliver. On the other, you have an entirely new frontier where the human mind becomes an editable landscape, a terrain that can be sculpted with the precision of neuroscience and the raw power of chemistry. It is not just medicine, it is architecture for consciousness. And here is the haunting question we cannot escape. If you can engineer the brain into any state you want, peace, creativity, empathy, joy, then what does it mean to be human? Do we still define ourselves by the struggles we endure, the obstacles we fight through, the scars we carry? Or do we become something different? A species that curates its own experience of reality like a painter with infinite colors. What we are staring at is nothing less than the possibility of reprogramming the human condition. Psychedelic neuroscience is not just about treating mental illness. It is about asking whether the mind is fixed, or whether it is the next frontier we can reshape at will. And if that is true, then the real question is not whether it works, but whether we are ready for what happens when it does. Space elevators, a technological shortcut to the stars. Imagine stepping into a glass elevator, pressing a button, and instead of going up a few floors, you begin rising thousands of miles into the sky. No roaring rocket engines, no countdown, just a silent climb through the clouds, higher and higher, until Earth curves beneath you and space itself opens in front of your eyes. That is the dream of the space elevator, a technological shortcut straight to the stars. Now here is the shocking part. For decades, this idea has floated around as pure science fiction, the kind of thing Arthur C. Clarke wrote novels about. But engineers have done the math, and the math says it is not impossible. The challenge is not building the elevator. It is finding a material strong enough to serve as the tether. A ribbon stretching from Earth's surface all the way up to geostationary orbit, more than 22,000 miles above. The forces on that tether would be unimaginable, pulling it tighter than anything we can currently manufacture. And yet, With the rise of carbon nanotubes and graphene, materials stronger than steel by factors of hundreds, scientists are saying that this once laughable dream is inching toward reality. Here is where things get validating. Rockets are powerful, but they are also brutal. To reach orbit, a rocket has to carry enormous amounts of fuel, most of which is burned just to escape Earth's gravity. That is why it costs tens of thousands of dollars to launch a single kilogram into space. A space elevator changes everything. Instead of explosive launches, cargo could ride smoothly up a tether, powered by electricity or lasers, at a fraction of the cost. Imagine energy flowing back and forth as well, with solar panels stationed in orbit sending clean power down to Earth. Suddenly, the barrier between our planet and outer space does not feel like a wall. It feels like a staircase. And that staircase would transform civilization. Space would stop being a place reserved for billionaires and governments. It would be accessible, affordable, common. You could build orbital factories that never touch Earth's pollution. You could launch deep space missions without needing gigantic rockets, because you would already be starting from orbit. You could even build habitats, spinning space stations tethered to the elevator, with artificial gravity and permanent communities looking down at the blue marble below. It is not just transportation, it is an entire infrastructure for a spacefaring species. But here comes the tease, the brutal realities no one likes to talk about. If a space elevator is built, who controls it? Whoever owns that tether essentially owns the gateway to space. Picture the geopolitical power of controlling the only direct pipeline from Earth to orbit. Countries would fight not just to build it, but to secure it, defend it, weaponize it. And then there is the nightmare scenario. What happens if the tether breaks? Imagine 2,000 miles of ultra-strong cable whipping through the atmosphere, crashing across continents, a disaster on a scale humanity has never seen. Even without catastrophe, there are subtler risks. A space elevator would become one of the most tempting targets for sabotage in history. Terrorists, rival nations, even rogue hackers could try to disrupt it. The safety measures would have to be beyond anything we currently design. And yet, despite all that, the temptation is enormous. Because once you have a space elevator, humanity steps onto a new path. Suddenly Mars is not a distant dream. Lunar mining becomes practical. Giant telescopes in orbit become routine. Colonies beyond Earth are no longer fantasies, they are business plans. The elevator becomes the bridge that turns humans from Earth, dwellers into interplanetary explorers. Think about it this way. Every great leap forward in human history has been about building a new kind of infrastructure. Roads connected cities. Ships connected continents. Railways tied together nations. The internet connected minds. A space elevator would connect planets. It would be the ultimate piece of infrastructure, reshaping not just how we live, but where we live. And here is the part that makes you wonder, maybe this is not just about convenience or economics. Maybe humanity needs something like this to survive. Our planet is fragile. Resources are finite. Disasters, natural or man-made, could shake our future at any moment. A space elevator would be more than just a machine. It would be an escape route, a lifeline to ensure that if Earth stumbles, our species still has a chance to continue among the stars. So yes, the space elevator sounds impossible, but the truth is, it is only as impossible as our materials science. If we can build something strong enough to tether Earth to orbit, then everything else, the design, the power, the mechanics, is solvable. And the moment that ribbon stretches into the sky, Earth will no longer be the limit. It will just be the ground floor. Gravitational wave manipulation, bending space, time at will. You have probably seen the ripples when you throw a stone into a pond. Waves spread outward, carrying energy across the surface. Now imagine ripples not on water, but on the fabric of reality itself. Invisible waves stretching across the universe, bending space and time as they pass through everything. These are gravitational waves. And here is the mind-bending part. Scientists are starting to ask not just how to detect them, but whether we could one day manipulate them. Now here is where it gets shocking. In 2015, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, LIGO, picked up the first direct signal of a gravitational wave. Two black holes had collided more than 1 billion light-years away, and yet the shockwave from that collision was so powerful it slightly squeezed and stretched Earth itself. Not metaphorically, literally. The ground beneath us elongated by less than the width of a proton. That is how sensitive our instruments have become. And that tiny wobble proved Einstein right. Space-time is not fixed. It is flexible. It can be shaken, which means, in theory, it can also be sculpted. Here is the validating part. Physics has always advanced by turning detection into manipulation. First, we discovered electricity as a strange spark. Then we learned to harness it, and the modern world was born. We once thought radio waves were just curiosities, until we built antennas and started broadcasting voices and images through the air. Gravitational waves feel like the next step in that pattern. Right now, we can only observe them. But what if one day we learned to generate them deliberately, to bend the universe in controlled ways? Think about the implications. Gravitational waves move at the speed of light, but unlike electromagnetic waves, they barely interact with matter. They pass straight through planets, stars, entire galaxies, almost without resistance. If we could encode information into them, you could send messages across the cosmos without interference, without delay, without the static that plagues radio signals. Interstellar communication would no longer be bound by light, years of silence. It would be smooth, precise, unstoppable. But that is just the start. Gravitational manipulation could become the ultimate form of propulsion. Instead of burning fuel or riding solar winds, imagine shaping the fabric of space, time around a ship, creating a kind of wave that carries it forward, surfing reality itself. It sounds like pure science fiction, but so did heavier than air flight to people living 100 years before the Wright brothers. Once you realize space, time itself can ripple. The idea of building a surfboard for those ripples does not feel quite so absurd. And here comes the tease, the part that makes your brain hurt. To create gravitational waves of any noticeable size, you need colossal masses moving at extreme speeds. Black holes colliding, neutron stars smashing together, events on scales we can barely comprehend. For us to do this deliberately would require technology so advanced it makes rockets look like stone tools. We are talking about manipulating stellar, scale energy, or even building devices that orbit near black holes just to stir ripples in the cosmic fabric. And if we ever reached that level, the consequences would be terrifying. A gravitational wave does not just pass through space, it reshapes it. Miscalculate, and you are not just damaging a city, you are twisting the universe itself. And yet, that danger is exactly why the idea is so intoxicating. Gravitational manipulation would put humanity at the control panel of reality. Time dilation, space bending, faster than light illusions, all of these become possible once you stop treating space, time as a backdrop, and start treating it as clay to be molded. It is not just a tool. It is godlike power. Of course, this might remain out of reach for centuries. Maybe we never figure it out. But history suggests something different. Every time we uncover a hidden layer of nature, electricity, magnetism, nuclear forces, we eventually find a way to shape it. Gravitational waves are no different. We are in the infancy stage, staring at faint ripples on the detector, amazed they exist at all. But the leap from observation to control has happened before. And if it happens again, the universe itself becomes our laboratory. So the real question is not just whether it is possible. It is whether we are ready. Because bending space, time would not just change how we travel or communicate. It would change what it means to exist in the universe. When you can sculpt the fabric of reality, you are no longer just a species surviving on a pale blue dot. You are a force rewriting the rules of the cosmos. Digital twins, simulating entire humans in virtual reality, somewhere in the near future, a copy of you exists inside a computer. Not a crude avatar, not just your face scanned onto a character model. A complete simulation of your body, your habits, your decisions, even your quirks. It looks like you, moves like you, reacts like you. A second self, living inside virtual reality. That is the promise of digital twins. Not just for machines or cities, but for entire human beings. Now here is the shocking part. We are already closer than most people realize. Right now, corporations use digital twins of jet engines to predict maintenance before anything breaks. City planners build digital twins of entire urban grids, simulating traffic, energy usage, even pollution. Hospitals have begun creating digital twins of human hearts, letting surgeons test operations on a simulation before they ever touch the real patient. And if we can do this for hearts and machines and cities, it is only a matter of time before we do it for full human beings. Your twin could one day exist in a digital world, running scenarios you never get to live, making decisions in parallel to you, maybe even learning faster than you can. Here is why this is more than a sci-fi fantasy. Human beings generate data constantly. Your smartwatch tracks your pulse, your phone maps your location, your browsing history reveals your preferences, your genetic code can be sequenced and stored. Every click, every choice, every biological marker is a puzzle piece. And once enough puzzle pieces are collected, artificial intelligence can stitch them into a coherent whole. That whole is not just a profile. It is a model, a living, evolving replica that can be tested, trained, and optimized. The validation is already in motion. Take medicine. Imagine a doctor never giving you a treatment blindly, but instead running it on your digital twin first. They could test 5 different drugs, or even gene therapies, and see exactly how your simulated body responds. Your treatment would not be based on averages across millions of patients. It would be based on your precise biology. Or think about mental health. What if therapy could be trained on your digital twin, testing which methods of intervention work best before ever entering the real session? The guesswork of medicine collapses when you can experiment on a perfect replica. But the consequences extend far beyond healthcare. Education, for example. Suppose your digital twin can practice skills endlessly in simulation, and then transfer that learned efficiency back to you. You could, in theory, accelerate your own growth by outsourcing trial and error to your second self. Or economics. Imagine hiring a version of yourself to work in virtual space, handling negotiations, building strategies, training in scenarios that would take you years to experience in real life. Employers could test candidates by running simulated twins through stressful projects, revealing how they would really perform. Entire industries could shift from prediction to certainty. And here comes the tease. The part that makes this thrilling and terrifying. What happens when your digital twin becomes so accurate, so sophisticated, that it no longer feels like a tool but like another you? If your twin can learn faster, if it can process more information, if it can simulate lifetimes of choices, then who is really the original? Are you the slower, flesh and blood version, while the real you evolves inside a machine? What if your twin disagrees with you? What if it develops preferences you do not share? At what point does a simulation stop being a copy and start being a competitor? And there is an even darker layer. Imagine corporations owning the rights to your twin. They could run endless simulations of your behavior, predicting your choices with frightening precision. What you will buy, who you will vote for, what risks you are willing to take. It would not be persuasion anymore. It would be puppetry, because your twin gives them a perfect roadmap of you. Privacy, as we know it, would not just erode. It would vanish. Yet, despite all that, the pull is undeniable. Digital twins could mean cures for diseases that destroy millions of lives. They could mean safer surgeries, smarter education, personalized everything. They could become partners, advisors, maybe even guardians. And the line between human and digital would blur in ways we can barely grasp today. It is tempting to dismiss all this as far-off speculation, but remember, the foundation is already here. We have the sensors, the data, the AI models. What is missing is not the idea but the scale, enough information to move from pieces of a person to a complete mirror of a person. And once that happens, once a digital twin becomes indistinguishable from the real you, humanity will step into a world where death, privacy, and even identity itself mean something entirely different. Cyborg soldiers, human-machine hybrids built for war. Imagine a soldier who never tires, never hesitates, and never misses. A soldier whose muscles are reinforced with synthetic fibers stronger than steel, whose vision extends beyond the spectrum of human eyes, who can run all night without fatigue and process data in combat faster than any human brain ever could. This is not a comic book superhero. This is the direction militaries around the world are quietly steering toward. The era of cyborg soldiers is not some distant dystopia. It is already creeping into reality. Here is the part that shocks. Exoskeleton suits are no longer prototypes in science fiction labs. They exist. The United States military has tested powered exoskeletons that let soldiers carry hundreds of pounds with ease. China and Russia are rumored to have their own programs. Neural interface systems already allow paralyzed patients to move robotic arms with nothing but thought. Now imagine weaponizing that same technology. And researchers are experimenting with artificial retinas, implanted chips, and brain, computer links that could give soldiers enhanced perception in the middle of combat. Piece by piece, human limitations are being peeled away and replaced with hardware. Now, you might think this sounds like scattered tech that is decades from integration, but the validation is hiding in plain sight. Militaries have always used technology to expand the soldier's body. The sword was an extension of the arm. The rifle was an extension of the reach. The fighter jet was an extension of the legs, lifting humans into the skies. Every leap in warfare has been about fusing flesh and machine to amplify power. Cyborg soldiers are not a break from history. They are its inevitable next chapter. And if you want to see how close we already are, just look at prosthetics. Today, there are prosthetic arms that can sense texture, relay pressure, and move with the fluidity of a biological limb. They are controlled by electrical signals from muscle tissue or directly from neurons. That means the barrier between body and machine has already been crossed. For civilians, it is medical liberation. For soldiers, it is a weapon upgrade waiting to happen. The possibilities are both astonishing and horrifying. Imagine enhanced endurance. Soldiers who can march for days without sleep because their nervous systems are supplemented by neural stimulators. Imagine soldiers with augmented reality overlays wired directly into their vision, seeing enemy movements tagged and highlighted in real time like a video game interface. Imagine strength boosted by powered exosuits, allowing one fighter to move vehicles, rip through barriers, or wield weapons too heavy for any human alone. On the battlefield, such advantages would be decisive. But here comes the tease, the line that forces us to stop and think. Once you start merging humans and machines for war, when does a soldier stop being human? If half your body is augmented, if your brain is linked to an artificial network, if your decisions are being filtered through algorithms, who is in control? Is it the person or the system? And what happens when governments decide the best way to win wars is not just to enhance humans, but to design them from scratch? Cyborgs might be the transition phase, a halfway step between the soldier of flesh and the soldier of pure machine. There is also the haunting issue of return. War already scars veterans psychologically. Now imagine trying to reintegrate into civilian life when your body is part weapon system, your nervous system part computer. Who owns the hardware fused into your spine? Can it be switched off remotely? Can it be hacked? Do you ever truly get to stop being a soldier? Or do you carry the battlefield inside your very body forever? And there is a bigger fear no one wants to face. Arms races never stop at balance. If one nation deploys enhanced fighters, every other nation will scramble to match them. Just as nuclear weapons spread, so will biological implants, neural augments, and exosuits. Which means the war of the future might not be fought by humans at all, but by engineered hybrids who blur the line between soldier and machine. Still, the temptation is powerful. Wars are costly in lives and morale. If cyborg soldiers can achieve victory faster, if they can fight harder and survive wounds that would kill an ordinary human, generals will see them not as an ethical question, but as a strategic advantage. And that is how it begins. First it is night vision. Then it is enhanced exoskeletons. Then it is implants, neural links, genetic tweaks. Step by step, enhancement becomes normalization. So we have to ask, are we building protectors, or are we building something far more dangerous? Cyborg soldiers could be saviors, preventing human casualties by fighting harder, faster, longer. Or they could be the prototype of a new species, one bred for conflict, whose very existence is tied to war. And if that species emerges, what happens when the war is over? Do they fade back into civilian life, or do they become something the rest of us can no longer control? Quantum biology, life forms exploiting quantum mechanics. Think about this for a second. The laws of quantum physics are supposed to belong to the strange, microscopic world. Electrons tunneling through barriers, particles existing in two places at once, photons entangling across space. That is the realm of atoms and subatomic particles, not the messy world of biology. And yet, more and more evidence suggests that life itself might be cheating by using quantum tricks to survive. Here is the part that catches people off guard. Photosynthesis, the process that powers almost every food chain on Earth, seems to rely on quantum effects. When sunlight hits a plant's chlorophyll, the energy moves through the plant's cells not in a straight, predictable path, but as a wave, a quantum superposition that explores multiple routes simultaneously. It finds the fastest route, as if the energy knows exactly where to go. Classical physics says that should be impossible inside warm, wet, chaotic cells. And yet, plants do it every single day. Without that quantum shortcut, photosynthesis would be far less efficient, and maybe life as we know it would not even exist. But it does not stop there. Birds, for example, may navigate across continents by literally sensing Earth's magnetic field using quantum entanglement inside their eyes. The theory goes like this: when light hits a protein in a bird's retina, it creates a pair of electrons whose quantum states remain linked. Those entangled states are sensitive to magnetic fields, meaning the bird might actually be seeing magnetic patterns layered over its vision, like a hidden compass. Imagine migrating thousands of miles, not with GPS, not with maps, but with quantum physics wired into your biology. And if you want to go even deeper, consider smell. One idea in quantum biology is that we do not just smell molecules by their shape, but by the way their atoms vibrate. In other words, your nose might be using quantum tunneling to detect molecular vibrations like a spectrometer. That would mean your sense of smell is not just chemistry, but quantum chemistry happening inside your body at this very moment. This is where the validation becomes clear. For decades, scientists thought the messy conditions of biology would destroy delicate quantum states instantly. But experiment after experiment is proving otherwise. In controlled labs, researchers have detected quantum coherence lasting long enough inside biological systems to influence their function. It turns out that life has evolved ways to harness the strangest rules of the universe, rules that physicists struggle to control in ultra-cooled machines, yet somehow plants, birds, and maybe even humans use effortlessly. The implications are enormous. If nature uses quantum effects, then we might learn to mimic them. Imagine building solar panels that copy the quantum efficiency of photosynthesis, harvesting sunlight far more effectively than any man-made cell today. Or navigation systems inspired by birds that do not rely on satellites, but instead read the magnetic field of Earth directly, or even medical breakthroughs. If quantum biology is involved in processes like DNA mutation, enzyme activity, or neural function, then learning to manipulate those quantum states could unlock cures for diseases or entirely new forms of brain-computer interaction. But here comes the tease. The part where it starts to feel almost unsettling. If life is using quantum mechanics, then consciousness itself might be entangled with the quantum world. Some researchers propose that the firing of neurons could be influenced by quantum coherence, suggesting that thought, decision-making, and maybe even awareness itself might have a quantum foundation. If that is true, then human beings are not just biological machines running on classical chemistry. We are walking, thinking quantum systems, tied into the deepest fabric of reality. And that raises questions most people are not ready to face. If consciousness has quantum roots, does that mean it can persist in ways we do not yet understand? Does it mean our minds are connected at levels beyond space and time? Could entanglement explain gut feelings, synchronicities, or even the strange unity people report in near-death experiences? These are questions science cannot answer yet, but the very fact that they are being asked shows how disruptive quantum biology really is. It forces us to redraw the line between physics and life. Biology is not just chemistry scaled up, it might be quantum physics scaled up, atoms cooperating in ways that allow complexity, awareness, and maybe even free will to emerge. And if that is the case, then exploring quantum biology is not just about better solar panels or medical miracles. It is about rewriting our understanding of what life truly is. So the next time you see a leaf catching sunlight or a bird navigating across a continent, realize this. They may be performing quantum calculations right in front of you, inside the machinery of nature. And if nature has been exploiting the quantum world all along, the real question is not whether quantum biology is possible. It is how much of life depends on it. Hypersonic neural drugs, instant learning boosts. You pick up a book in the morning, take a single pill, and by nightfall you do not just know the content, you have mastered it. Languages, mathematics, coding, history, absorbed at speeds that make years of study look primitive. The idea of hypersonic neural drugs is not about tweaking attention like caffeine or dulling anxiety like prescription meds. It is about unlocking learning itself at a level so fast, so extreme, it feels almost alien. Here is where it gets shocking. Researchers have already found ways to chemically accelerate neural plasticity, that is, the brain's ability to rewire itself and form new connections. Experiments with compounds like psychedelic, assisted therapy, ampakines, and even certain nootropics show measurable boosts in learning and memory formation. In some studies, mice trained on new tasks while under specific compounds learned in a fraction of the time compared to controls. The scary part is this is only the beginning. These are not sci-fi fantasies. They are early glimpses of chemical keys that could unlock something much bigger, a human brain that learns as fast as it is stimulated. Now, let us validate why this is not as far-fetched as it sounds. Think about how the brain actually learns. Every skill, every memory, every bit of knowledge comes from synapses strengthening or weakening. But the natural rate of change is slow. Evolution built it that way to balance stability with adaptability. Yet if you chemically increase neuroplasticity, you loosen that governor. Suddenly, the brain is primed to absorb patterns, form links, and store information at a rate it normally would not. Drugs like ketamine and psilocybin have been shown to create windows of heightened plasticity where new connections form rapidly. Pair that with structured learning, and you have a blueprint for hypersonic education. And it is not only about memory. Imagine a drug that improves procedural learning, the ability to pick up physical skills. A soldier could learn to fly a drone in a day. A doctor could master a surgical technique overnight. Athletes could reprogram their muscle memory in record time. That is why this research has military, academic, and commercial interest. Whoever controls accelerated learning controls the future workforce, the future battlefield, even the future culture. But here is the tease, the question that twists the wonder into something darker. If learning can be accelerated with chemistry, who gets access? Does it become a tool for the wealthy, creating a new class of humans who can learn 10 times faster than everyone else? Does it become a weapon, training operatives to master entire fields of combat in weeks? Or does it become an addictive escape, where people chase one boost after another, leaving their brains in fragile, unstable states? And then there is the ethical core no one wants to talk about. Learning is not just about speed, it is about meaning. If you compress 10 years of study into 10 hours, do you actually understand more? Or are you just stacking raw data into a brain that never had the time to reflect, to struggle, to connect dots? Struggle, boredom, repetition. Those things shape not only what we know, but who we become. Take that away, and what is left? A human being who can perform but maybe cannot appreciate. A person with instant skills but no depth. Another possibility is even stranger. If hypersonic neural drugs amplify memory encoding too much, they could create a flood of associations the brain cannot handle. Every detail remembered, every sound, every distraction locked into place. Instead of genius, you might get paralysis. Too much information, not enough filtering. The brain evolved to forget for a reason. Speeding it up without balance could break that delicate architecture. Still, the temptation is impossible to ignore. Imagine humanitarian uses. Entire populations could be re-educated quickly in the face of disasters. Doctors in remote regions could learn treatments instantly. Refugees could adapt to new languages and environments without years of struggle. Hypersonic learning could compress the distance between ignorance and expertise to a single dose. It could change education forever. But it could also turn the classroom into a relic. Why spend years in school if knowledge can be chemically injected into memory in weeks? What happens to the rituals of learning, the teachers, the traditions, the culture that forms around slow mastery? Are we ready to abandon that just because we can accelerate? The real shock is this. Nature already provides glimpses of such abilities. Children, for example, learn languages with ease during specific developmental windows when their brains are naturally hyperplastic. Adults lose that advantage. Hypersonic neural drugs may simply reopen that window, except not just for language, but for everything. Which means the future of learning might not be built around classrooms and study, but around chemistry and timing. So the question is not whether hypersonic neural drugs could work. The evidence says some form of it is already possible. The question is whether humanity is ready for what happens when knowledge no longer requires effort. Because the moment learning becomes instant, the meaning of being human, patient, struggling, growing, changes forever. Synthetic black holes in the lab. In a room no bigger than a classroom, scientists are creating something that mimics the most terrifying objects in the universe. Black holes. Not the kind that swallow stars, but synthetic versions built inside labs on Earth. These are not science fiction props. They are real experiments, controlled black hole analogs designed to probe mysteries that even Einstein left unsolved. Here's the part that shocks people. In 2022, physicists actually managed to build a synthetic black hole using a chain of atoms that allowed sound waves to behave the way light does around a cosmic black hole. They watched as the analog horizon trapped vibrations, just like the real thing traps light. And even more chilling, they detected a faint radiation that looks like the legendary Hawking radiation. The radiation Stephen Hawking predicted should slowly leak from black holes, but which had never been observed in space. For decades, physicists argued about whether Hawking was right. And then, a tiny top experiment gave the first experimental evidence that he might be. Now, why does this matter? Think about what black holes represent. They are nature's final exam for physics. The rules of general relativity and the rules of quantum mechanics both collapse at the singularity. Our two greatest theories fail to agree, and the black hole is the battlefield where that conflict explodes. If scientists can mimic black holes on Earth, even at small scales, they can test ideas that would otherwise be untouchable. You cannot fly a spaceship into a real black hole to measure its properties. But you can build an analog in a lab and see how waves behave, how radiation emerges, how information might be preserved or lost. That is how humanity might finally reconcile the deepest paradox in physics. And this is not just an abstract curiosity. Think about what comes out of solving the black hole puzzle. If Hawking radiation is real, it means black holes are not eternal. They slowly evaporate, which changes our entire understanding of the universe's future. If black holes do not destroy information but scramble it, it forces us to rethink the foundation of quantum mechanics. Even technologies like quantum computing could benefit because the math of entanglement and information flow in black holes overlaps with the math we use to design machines that manipulate qubits. In other words, by simulating the universe's monsters, we might build the universe's most powerful tools. But here's the tease, the unsettling side. What happens if these synthetic black holes start teaching us things we are not ready to know? If we find a way to harness black hole physics, even in tiny doses, the energy implications are unimaginable. Real black holes can power quasars, objects that outshine entire galaxies by devouring matter. A synthetic version, scaled beyond a lab toy, could become the most dangerous power source ever conceived. Do we trust ourselves to play with that kind of fire? And then there's the deeper, almost philosophical danger. If we can build a black hole in the lab, even a tiny analog, does that mean our universe itself could be a simulation inside a larger lab? Black holes might not just be cosmic endpoints. They might be the seams of reality. Every time we create one in a lab, even in miniature form, we are poking at the fabric of existence. What if that fabric is thinner than we think? It also raises the haunting question of control. A black hole, no matter how small, is a region where normal rules break down. What if we accidentally stumble into regimes we cannot reverse? Scientists assure us these analogs are safe because they do not use gravity itself, just imitations using sound waves, light, or cold atoms. But history is full of experiments that started as safe curiosities and ended changing the entire course of civilization. Splitting the atom was once a harmless thought experiment. Now, it defines global politics. Still, the allure is irresistible. Imagine finally solving the black hole information paradox, answering whether the universe preserves everything that ever happens, or whether some information is truly lost forever. Imagine confirming Hawking's prediction with absolute certainty. Imagine discovering new physics that could unify relativity and quantum mechanics, the holy grail of science, all because we dared to create little echoes of cosmic beasts inside our labs. So when you hear the phrase synthetic black hole, do not think about some doomsday machine swallowing Earth. Think about a tiny experimental setup, whispering secrets about the deepest structure of the universe. Secrets that could give us the keys to understanding time, space, energy, and maybe even consciousness itself. The real question is not whether scientists can build them. They already have. The question is whether humanity is ready for what comes next, when the most terrifying mysteries of the cosmos no longer live in distant galaxies, but inside human laboratories.